It is Tuesday night in East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Come on in and gather around. Let's have a good time talking Michigan State sports, Michigan State football. Opening week of the season, college football season ready to kick off shortly. This Friday night, Spartan Stadium, Michigan State against the Central Michigan visiting Chippewas. Michigan State will look to go 1-0 and get the season started on a positive note for all of the Michigan State fans out there. Come on in. I'll be reading your questions shortly. In the meantime, if you like what's going on, give us a like. Also, subscribe to this channel. Get over to SpartanMag.com. Become a SpartanMag.com subscriber. $1, you can test drive the thing for a month. Tell us if you like it or not. I think if you're liking this and you hang with us for a while, you will like it. If you like this, if you're sick enough to come in here talk and listen to us talk about Michigan State football for a couple hours, you're the type of person we want over at SpartanMag.com. Come on in and gather around. Let's go. By the way, this nonsense, if you've not seen it before, no need to adjust your television dials. Remember when we had television dials? Dating myself with that one. Anyway, SpartanMag.com, all the coverage over there. Had some coverage today of the press conference over in East Lansing at the Spartan Stadium. Courtney Hawkins came out and spoke, said it's the deepest wide receiver room he's had since he's been at Michigan State. That's positive, I would say. Not as many proven players, but they've got a lot of competition there and some pretty good athletes at the wide receiver position. Going to need those guys to come through. Coverage throughout the month of August. Preseason coverage unmatched, unapproached. SpartanMag.com if you're a Michigan State fan. That's where you get all the information. Plus, at the Underground Bunker message board, that is a forum for the most astute Michigan State fans on the planet. Come in there. We mix it up. Stay civil for the most part. Talk football, analysis, recruiting, basketball, a little bit of hockey, a little bit of real estate, a little bit of electronic purchases, all kinds of stuff. The Underground Bunker message board, that is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports. It is the daily narrative for Michigan State sports. And that is where I invited SpartanMag.com subscribers to post their questions that we will be fielding here tonight. I've got about 10 or probably about time for 10 of those. Also in the comments section, feel free to post over there. We will field some questions over there. We got some special guests. We're expecting Big Movie's going to be chiming in today. We're expecting a call from Big Movie. See what he's thinking as Michigan State gets ready to kick off the 2023 college football season. Also, fire-breathing Spartan fan extraordinaire, media mogul, media watchdog. That's right, Crowley Sullivan from Pasadena, California. He's going to be blazing a trail through here and letting us know what he thinks about Michigan State as he's getting ready for the big Michigan State football season to kick off on Friday. Crowley Sullivan, 25-year veteran in the sports media industry, spent 10 years at ESPN, won 2 Emmys and a Peabody Award for his work as a producer on the iconic series Sports Century. Remember Sports Century? Crowley was behind that. He's a Spartan grad. And he's currently oversees UFC Fight Pass as its VP general manager. And as he likes to say, he once ate lunch and dinner at the Peanut Barrel for 26 consecutive days. Lunch and dinner, Peanut Barrel, 26 straight days. I'd like to see Joe DiMaggio try that. That'd be kind of easy, actually, Peanut Barrel. Good fun over there. All right, so anyway, let's get to the questions. I got to find my cheat sheet. Where is it? Here we go. Question number 1 from Adam from Grand Rapids, Michigan. He says 2 questions. Who do you expect to start at quarterback on Friday night? I've been saying since spring Noah Kim. I thought he had a big lead going into the summer. Outperformed Hauser in the spring. Hauser's a young guy. He was coming along nicely. But Peyton Thorne left partly not because of Hauser, but because Kim was coming on strong and some other things. But Hauser had a great summer, had a very good August camp, whittled that thing down to being a coin flip going into that last scrimmage, from what I understand. It's tight. Now, I don't know what Mel Tucker is. I can't get inside his head and tell you what he's thinking, but we know that Mel Tucker likes to go with the quarterback who is his best competitor. Also, most coaches like a quarterback who rallies the troops Sometimes players respond a little bit more to one over the other, whether they're trying to or not. Sometimes those happen. I don't know what the answer is on those two fronts. But I'm still expecting Noah Kim. I called it 50-50. I didn't know last week or the week before. I'll call it 51 Noah Kim. The players already know. They've been told they're in game prep week. So you go into game prep with with set starters at set positions. So they already know. Nothing's leaked out yet, but I'm expecting Noah Kim. Could be wrong. And if it is Noah Kim, Michigan State fans need to get behind him. If it's Hauser, get behind him. Don't be. I know it's for fans. It's natural to start pining for the number 2 quarterback, but don't be in the student section chanting for Damian Terry when you don't really know as much as the coaches know. But I do think Michigan State's going into this game with 2 quarterbacks that can play winning football. I think they came out of the spring after Peyton Thorne left feeling that they had one and another one had to rise up. Hauser's done that. Kim's been on the field a little bit in mop-up situations, looked pretty good, looked pretty cool. But Hauser's got some talent. He can do a lot of things. Adam in Grand Rapids, he has another question. He says, what is the one thing that has to happen this year for Michigan State to win more than 6 football games? In order for Michigan State to win more than 6, the main thing, in my opinion, be on the same page defensively. I call it same pageness. Signal comes in, communicate it, get everybody on the same page. Don't have one guy in press, 3 guys in zone, and a play gets out, 80-yard touchdown run. Can't have those busts. Got to be on the same page. Whether it's communication, whether it's coaches not giving them too much volume of plays, paralysis by analysis. Too much volume, you blow your speakers. Did I date myself with that one too? Be on the same page defensively. That breeds consistency. That breeds a brand of football that can keep you competitive week in and week out. You don't beat yourself. Take care of the ball, all those cliches. Get on the same page defensively, something they've not been for the past 2 years, even the great year in 2021. Last year really struggled with it, largely because of the injuries. Xavier Henderson going out really hurt. Darius Snow going out really hurt. Slade was out, that hurt. 27 starters, we talked about it in the past. So that's kind of a mulligan. Maybe they would have been better last year. I'm not sure, but stay healthy on defense, same page, win 6 games, and build from there. Question number 2, Jeff from DeWitt, Michigan. He says, in your opinion, are there things that either Kim or Hauser bring to the table that Peyton Thorne did not bring that will give Jay Johnson more creativity in play calling? Creativity, I don't know if you're going to see Lincoln Riley, Josh Heupel type of full blast, ultra athletic, bells and whistles creativity. I think the play calling will be, they had very good talent in 2021. Kenneth Walker, all-pro running back. I guess they called it an all-pro, right? Played in the Pro Bowl. Does that count? I think he was Pro Bowl. I don't know. But, he's great. And you had NFL receivers, Jalen Naylor, Jaden Reed. Keon Coleman probably will be one at some point. And Michigan State mixed in that flea flicker quite often, not to dazzle anybody, but because that was part of their play-action game. That's pretty creative, right? But they had all kinds of talent that year, and I think what you saw that year is what the playbook looks like. Now you're asking, since it's, is Peyton, now you have Hauser or Kim instead of Thorne, could there be some development on top of that? Good question. I think it's possible. I think that Hauser and Kim possibly could be better throwing on the run. Bootlegs, waggles, creativity, maybe even off the scramble. Thorne was okay in that area, but I think these two could be better at some point. Doesn't mean they're going to be better right away. Peyton Thorne would have been a senior, a guy that had been tested. You can say he was not great, true, but pretty good when he was surrounded by good players and when he was healthy and able to play with a lead and had a run game. So there's going to be a learning curve, whether it's Kim or Hauser. From the jump, I don't expect either quarterback to be better than Thorne right away. Maybe by September 25th, maybe. Was Kim close to being as good as Thorne in the spring? That's what I hear. I hear he outplayed him in a couple of those spring scrimmages. Does that mean he'll be better than Thorne when there's 75,000 people in the stands, 2 million people watching on television, and the circumstances are real? Remains to be seen. The ceiling of potential is there. Does that give Jay Johnson a chance to be a little bit, call some plays a little differently? Possibly. I think so. A little more arm strength, a little more mobility. I think it's possible. But again, I don't know if you're going to see anything all that dazzling or anything that's really going to break the videotape. I could be wrong. We continue to learn about Jay Johnson as we go into year number 4. All right, question number 3. Spartan Roxy from Parts Unknown. And he asks, let's see here. He says, what are your thoughts on Tucker's comments about being behind in name, image, and likeness? He says, even though Michigan State was named the top NIL program and its relationship to, what do I think about the NIL and its relationship to winning record-wise and talent attraction? That's the big comment. That's the big topic of the week. Big one. If you don't know what we're talking about, if you're watching this, you probably do know what we're talking about. Graham Couch, the fine columnist for the Lansing State Journal, had an exclusive interview with Mel Tucker a few days ago, and they discussed name, image, and likeness. That was part of the column. And Mel Tucker made a comment that basically, I'm paraphrasing, but saying that Michigan State is behind in name, image, and likeness. He cited $13 million in NIL for some teams. He says we're not anywhere close to that. So what do I think about that? We talked about that a little bit in yesterday's VCast over at Spartan Stadium. Our associate editor at SpartanMag.com, Paul Konendijk, and I, in front of the camera over there in the north end zone, talking Michigan State football. We got into that one a little bit because it became a big topic of conversation. Interesting quotes from that column. My good friend Mike Valenti had some powerful thoughts about it on his fine show in Detroit. 97 won the ticket with our good friend Rico Beard, his co-host. And Mike does a great job, great broadcaster, and he has hard opinions. And like I've always said, I don't always agree with him, and I didn't agree with some of these things. But sometimes there have been times in the past when I've disagreed with him, and he's turned out to be correct. So just because I disagree does not mean that I'm right, or that he's wrong. But the NIL thing, it was, in my opinion, it was Tucker speaking out to the masses, to potential donors, to let them know that more is needed if you want to recruit at a top 10, top 15 level. And that's not unlike what Nick Saban said when he met with donors famously 2 years ago and barked out about Texas A&M having just bought the top-ranked recruiting class. And Saban was saying this in a closed meeting. Well, it was an alumni function, not a press conference, but somebody recorded it and it leaked out. And I think Saban was a little bit embarrassed by that because Jimbo Fisher was really offended. They smoothed it over, kind of. But Jimbo Fisher really lashed out at Saban. Interesting, those guys have worked together before. Publicly, everything's okay, but beneath the surface, you could tell that Jimbo Fisher doesn't like Saban. I'm sorry, that's what it looked like to me. And he wouldn't be the first assistant coach that dislikes Saban. Anyway, Saban's a great coach, but he's a jackass. We all know that. All right, so anyway, he's a tyrant, terrible person. I think he's a little bit better than he was when he was here, when he was in his 40s and here. The most miserable person I've ever met in my life. But that's beside the point. Great football coach. And what Saban was saying at that time, talking about A&M had just bought the nation's best recruiting class, he was telling his people, hey, we have had the best roster in college football for several years. If you expect us at Alabama to maintain that type of level of roster, we've got to spend with A&M, is what he was saying. Not unlike Ryan Day at Ohio State, when he met with donors, I think the same summer, when he mentioned, he looked at Ohio State's roster, and he said, in order to have this type of roster in the future, and in order to maintain this type of roster, he estimated that they would need to spend $13 million in NIL. Now, that's where Mel Tucker got that figure, $13 million. He says we're nowhere near that, which doesn't surprise me. I'm not sure Ohio State is near $13 million for that roster. That's just what Ryan Day put out there for his donors. Everybody's out there fundraising, trying to get money for donations. Lane Kiffin has talked about having short pockets when it comes to NIL. So Tucker's not the only one to do this. There might be a lot of Michigan State fans that are unaware of college football as a whole, that this is going on everywhere, and they might just look at Michigan State through a little tunnel. And when Mel Tucker says something, they react negatively about it. Well, newsflash, Michigan State needs money for NIL. Everybody does. Does Michigan State have the structure in place to accumulate the necessary NIL to compete on the recruiting trail like they want to? No. Can they get there? I mean, it's going to take a lot of structure. Your question is, Michigan State was named the top NIL program. Well, that was named, was it the NCAA? No, it was an NIL. It was some group in Atlanta that awarded it to Michigan State because the structure, I don't know what the criteria was. But apparently a lot of it has to do with the educational side of it, about preparing the players to approach and pursue name, image, and likeness, and name, image, and likeness education. That's what Michigan State won that award for. Does any of that rubber meet the road when it comes to going down to Georgia, Florida, Sun Belt areas, and backing up the NIL truck and coming back with 5-star recruits? No. Michigan State's still working on it. There's going to be a release later this week about some of the signings, so some of the NIL things going on at Michigan State, I think on Thursday, as everybody tries to make progress in that direction. Okay, so that's Tucker saying that they need to get more done in that area. And like I said yesterday in the VCast, my friend Mike Valenti criticized Tucker, saying that Tucker should be out front doing the fundraising to make sure Michigan State is strong in NIL. I disagree with that. The coach has to be an important component of it, but he can't be spending time on fundraising every day of the week. Like I said, I mean, if you want that from your coach, then go hire Sally Struthers to raise money for your program as a head coach. No, the head coach should be focused on NIL. I'm thinking just a handful of times a year. I look forward to talking to Mel Tucker about this and other coaches to get a lay of the land of what's going on in this aspect of college football, because it's very important. And frankly, I know a little bit about it, but not a lot. It's very important, but I'm not exactly sure what everybody else is doing and how much time coaches need to spend on it. Mel Tucker mentioned in Indianapolis that he said, it'd be good, maybe even it should be required for everybody to say what they're giving in NIL. He wants to know what's out there, because coaches don't know what's being spent. They talk to recruits, and recruits are like, hey, I'm going to need $600,000. That's what Miami's offering. That's what Oregon's offering. And Michigan State might be like, well, all right, we like you, but good luck with that, and maybe we will see you in the portal. And then the guy goes to Miami and maybe only gets $300,000. We don't know. That's what coaches would like to know. The money that's being talked about out there, is that actually taking place? Are you losing recruits based on lies? They don't know. So that's a part of it. And like I said, I look forward to learning more about it, just so I can be a little bit informative for the readers and listeners about it. Now, as far as the NIL deal, in my estimation, Michigan State's not going to spend with Texas and Texas A&M and Oklahoma with NIL. The Matt Ishbia thing, I'm not sure that Matt Ishbia is actually totally on the sidelines when it comes to donations for NIL. I know that NBA is not allowed to, but are there other ways for it to happen? I don't know. But I suspect he can still help in some ways. So, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, is Michigan State going to outspend those? Probably not. Now, Miami went big with NIL in year number 1 with Ruiz, but he's got some problems now, so maybe Miami doesn't have the money that they did before. So can Michigan State really spend with the big bucks people? Probably not, top to bottom, but you can pick your battles, because those programs are not going to be able to spend huge money on all 25 guys every year, I don't think. Because like a lot of people are saying, you're going to NIL donors and you keep going back to the same people for those donations, and it's not tax deductible. So It would take a lot of people with deep money cannons to fund it every single year. Chances are they're going to fund money for players. A player doesn't pan out, transfers out, and then the donor's like, man, you said you needed this dude. We paid $300,000 for him, and he only lasted a year. I'm not going to be donating this year or whatever. That's going to happen. So there were some big NIL pushes in year 1 and year 2. Could the water meet its own level there and that settle down a little bit? That very well could be the case right now. So water is seeking its own level in the NIL landscape. For Michigan State, I think that NIL is one of the tent poles to put up the whole big top, right? If you're Michigan State. You don't have great in-state recruiting. It's not like Georgia where you've got money and great in-state players that want to come to your place, and you're just playing duck, duck, goose, going around the circle, bulldog, 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 choosing your players. And Georgia, of course, goes to Texas and Florida and the West Coast too. They got a great thing going on. All right, so Michigan State, pick and choose, and one tent pole is some NIL guys like By Job, like Sam Levitt. That took some NIL grease to get those guys. By Job coming in from Florida IMG by way of Oklahoma. Big-time talent as a pass rusher. Sam Levitt, quarterback, Oregon, big-time talent. But, so Michigan State went NIL for a couple of guys there. Jordan Hall, I don't know exactly what went on there, but I'm sure they made it worth his while. If you want 5 or 6 guys like that rather than 2 or 3, that's going to take more money. That's the money that Tucker's talking about. Would he like to have 9 or 10 guys like that to go out and outbid people for 9 or 10? Sure. Can they get there? I'm not sure. But in the meantime, you can still win football games if you do these other things really, really well, which is what Michigan State has needed to do over the years. That comes down to evaluation in recruiting circles. I'm talking about 3 stars, 3-star recruits. Do a great job evaluating those 3 stars, getting in on them early, recruiting them hard. And then when the NIL thing happens, maybe you can match them. Maybe you don't have to match them in order to retain that guy. 3-star evaluation. I can see Michigan State doing a little bit more of that now than maybe they were thinking the years in the past when Saeed Khalif was in charge of it. Back then it was more 4-star, 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 bring in 44-star, 40 guys that are 4 stars during the summer, and then you only get like 12 or 13 of them, which was good to have a top 25 class 2 years ago. But he's no longer overseeing that. He's not with the program anymore. I'm not sure that if Michigan State had gone 11-2 like they did in 2021, if they did that like 3 straight years, then maybe you can go out and go after those guys and raise more money and make something like that happen. But in the meantime, Michigan State is settling back to where they've been in the past, and they've been able to have good teams in the past if they do these things really well. And I think they're settling down into that area right now. I do not know that for a fact. I've heard that a little bit on the periphery, but I've not heard that from Mel Tucker or people that coach with him. But I've been around Michigan State for 30 years like you guys have, 35 years. And although NIL has come in and the transfer portal is part of it, this part of it is still the same. 3-star evaluation within the radius. They haven't always been called 3 stars. It used to be called blue chippers or whatever. 3-star evaluation within the radius. The radius is 5 to 6 hours, so mom and dad can come see them play. Still a big deal. Maybe not as big as it used to be, but that's when it's going to – I think that's still going to remain a thing. You look on the roster right now, guys like Trey Mosley, 3-star radius. J.D. Duplain, 3-star radius. Nick Samak, 3-star radius. Derek Harmon, Detroiter, 3-star guy, radius, got him. And then the low 3-star guys within the radius, Maverick Hansen, Ethan Boyd, Montori Foster, Cal Halliday. I'm not saying these guys are going to beat Georgia, but if you do well in that category, that can help set a foundational layer if we're just looking at the current roster. And the current roster, the coaches like it. They like the size. They think there's more depth. It remains to be seen whether it can be a roster that's going to yield victories the way Michigan State people want, especially with the schedule the way it looks this year. But these are the players that, by all accounts, people are pretty happy with the roster in some ways. Now, Michigan State's unproven at quarterback, unproven at wide receiver, so unproven in the kicking game. So it's not like they're ready to go out and say, hey, we're at least an 8-4, 9-3 team. They're not there yet. That can happen, but a lot of X factors need to come around for that to happen. That's 3-star evaluation within the 5-hour radius. High 3-star, low 3-star. Now, 3-star evaluation outside of the radius. Simeon Barrow, Zion Young. Those are the type of guys that you can still go out and get if you're Michigan State, maybe even do it at a better clip right now with Mel Tucker than they did in the D'Antonio era. D'Antonio was great, but he didn't want to bother too much in Florida. He went down to Georgia and got some 2-stars that ended up being great NFL players. But 3-star evaluation outside the radius: Simeon Barrow, Zion Young. Simeon Barrow was a D'Antonio recruit. Zion Young was a Tucker recruit. Those type of guys. Malik Spencer is going to be good this year at safety. Jerron Glover, guy from Sarasota, wide receiver, in time could be pretty good. Eddie Pleasant, I think he's got a chance. Caleb Coley's got a chance. Malcolm Jones has a chance. Sean Brown from out in California. Isaiah Johnson, wide receiver from Virginia. Jalen Smith, wide receiver from Texas. These are 3-star evaluation guys that I think all have a chance to be pretty good. It remains to be seen. But that's what those guys are. Michigan State has gotten guys like that. How good is their evaluation? We will find out with those players in the future. How good is player development? We'll find out in the future with those batch of players. And it might be pretty good. We'll see. 4-star in-state guys. Now, NIL is going to be part of that more in the future, but you look on the current roster, Malik Carr, Jaden Mangum, Antonio Gates Jr., Spencer Brown, Alex Van Summeren, Dylan Tatum, those type of guys. Have to win recruiting battles for all those guys. NIL will be a part of it, but for a lot of those guys, you may not need to back up the truck. You just need to be competitive. And with NIL funds across the country could be starting to go down a little bit. If that tide goes down, you might not have to pay them a ton. Now, some of the big timers like Bryce Underwood and Deontay, the quarterback, that went to UCLA, they wanted and they will want a ton of money. I'm not sure Michigan State's in that category right now. We'll see. I mean, they're not in on Bryce Underwood. It's LSU, Michigan. It's Miami, Oregon, some others, I don't know. So for, in-state players ranked 2 to 8, that's got to be part of the tent pole also. 4-star guys who probably are NIL guys for whom you need to be attractive NIL-wise to get them outside of the radius: Keyshawn Blackstock, JUCO offensive lineman, Bai Jobe, Jordan Hall, Charles Brantley, those type of guys, 4-star guys. So if you've got a limited number of NIL money, you got your in-state 4-stars, you got your out-of-state 4-stars, allocation of resources, budgeting. Are you going to go out and sign, over the course of 4 years, 70 guys that are 4-stars and you're paying all of them $300,000 each? No. Money's not there to do that. So you got to make it count. Your Bai Jobes, your Jordan Halls, Sam Levitt, you got to make a count on the ones that you do go after. What about 4-star guys who are outside of the radius that are attracted to your assistant coaches and his pitch and the whole old-fashioned recruiting stuff? Gino Vandermark, Stanton Ramil, 4-star type of guys, not guys that Michigan State needed to back up the truck to get. Maybe they made it worth their while with a little bit of NIL, but they like Kapilovic, they like the pitch, they like the program. Old-fashioned recruiting was a factor in getting those guys. These are all tent poles to make it happen. And if you're perfect in that stuff and the schedule is somewhat manageable, then you can get into that 8-win, 9-win type of situation. And if other programs in the Big Ten falter a little bit, you pull an upset, then if the timing is right and all matches up, then you might make a run at a special season. This is all before going into the portal. Portal's another tent pole. NIL's part of that. So, and money needs to be a part of that too. I'm not sure Michigan State needs to go out and bring in 15 guys from the portal every year like they have been. That would probably be kind of expensive if you want the best. But quite frankly, you look in the portal, I call it the discard pile. Michigan State got Kenneth Walker in year 1, and that was great. He's one of the greatest transfer portal guys ever in terms of sign low, get big, right? I mean, there's been other ones like, the quarterback that went to USC and the wide receiver that went from Pitt to USC. There's big timers that have gone, with the Blue Bloods exchanging portal guys. But for the most part, when Michigan State goes in the portal, they're not getting guys that are proven starters at great programs. It's usually backup guys. And they come to Michigan State and they're still backup guys. The most successful transfer portal player is Jacoby Windman, who was a good, honorable mention all-conference player at UNLV. I think time might show that those mid-majors moving up is the way you want to go. I don't know. Or maybe local guys coming back like Malik Carr. It's tough, and they're trying to figure it out. And, Michigan State went deep with portal the first 2 or 3 years. We'll see if they do it again. I mean, they really tried to flip the roster. I don't think they will. I think they want to go a little bit more with high schools, but they don't have a lot of scholarship room available. But the portal is important. But when Michigan State got Kenneth Walker, it's like Michigan State won their first hand of blackjack. It's like, oh man, let's do this every year. It's not that simple. I mean, they felt they needed to flip the roster because they needed more size. They wanted a roster that was big at all positions. Tucker felt that was very important to do that. And they've got a big roster now. That front seven on defense is big. Offensive line is getting bigger. So they're working in that direction. So they try, the portal was new. And Tucker learned a lot about football at Alabama and Georgia. But while he was there was no portal. So he's a new head coach, and the portal is new, NIL is new, and there's nothing that he learned from those programs that prepared him for this. So he trusted his own instincts. They thought about it, had their war room meetings, and they went forward in some ways. There was some experimental stuff going on. And when you do experimental things, sometimes it doesn't work. You learn from it, you regroup, and you start again. I think the more they learn and the more they experiment and the more they learn lessons, the more they settle back to what D'Antonio always knew: evaluation, player development. If you have some NIL mixed in there, I do think Michigan State has the potential to recruit more of those 4 stars from outside of the radius than D'Antonio got. I think that is true. In the meantime, they need to make the other tent poles really strong, and that's what they're working on right now. All right, that's what I think about that. Let's go over here to the comments section. We appreciate everybody checking in with us. Hope that wasn't too long of an answer. I don't know if I put anyone to sleep with that or not. Sometimes I get a little excited. Sometimes I might offend some people. All right, I'm going to send out a tweet right now to let people know this nonsense is going on, because we care about the people on Twitter too. I still call it Twitter. Is that dating myself? Is that, I don't know. No further comment. Let's see, I got this. All right, I'm going to send out. So anyway, hey, go over to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber, $1 for a month, $50 or 50% off for the year. And you can go over there and see the headlines of what we've done in terms of coverage at SpartanMag.com throughout the month of August, through the summer, back into spring football coverage, all year, all the time. SpartanMag.com. Let me start this tweet right now. All right. Oh, something went wrong. Also, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's go over here to the comments area. John Elke's coming in. He's the first one here from Clarkston, checking in. Brad Fashenko checking in from Austin, Texas. Craig Go Green says, "What's up, comp?" Good to have Craig Go Green. These are some new names. We got Eric M. from Roswell, Georgia. It's good to have him checking in also. And rounding out the starting 5, Chris George checking in from the grandest of Rapids. I like that. The grandest of Rapids. So Chris George showing some creativity. I want him at the point. So I got Chris George at the point, Eric M's at the 2, Craig Go Green, he's my sharpshooter out there at the wing at the 3. Brad Fashenko, he's my stretch 4. He's knocking him down. And John Elke, he's got the elbows from Clarkston, Tim McCormick style. Sorry, Michigan State tried to recruit him. He became a Wolverine. Should I go with someone else? Clarkston, Kithier, Jokic. I don't know. Clarkston guy, sharp elbows, download John Elke. Appreciate him being here. Craig Go Green from Jackson, Michigan. Elke says, "Tell me the field goal kicking will be good this year." John, the field goal kicking is going to be good this year. You asked me to tell you that, but I don't know for sure. Jonathan Kim, there's a question that we will get to later. Jonathan Kim, the transfer from North Carolina, 5th-year senior, was a backup there. He had 1 extra point in 4 years at Carolina, I think. Kickoff specialist extraordinaire. Jonathan Kim, among the nation's leaders in touchbacks. He wanted to go to a place where he had a chance to be a field goal kicker. So now he's at Michigan State, Jonathan Kim. How good is he going to be? I don't know. I've heard he looks talented. I've not heard much. I've not heard anything about how things have gone in the scrimmages, so I don't really know. Clark Merrier, president and accounted for. Desert Spartan won from hot Phoenix, Arizona, 115 degrees today. 115. Nice. Nice. Tim D, game week, go green from Toronto. James Bannis is checking in from Sterling Heights. Zach Everett, what is something Central Michigan does well that us Michigan State fans should be concerned about? You know, Tucker talked about it a little bit with the fronts. They changed some things. They were pretty good on defense last year. Hey, Central Michigan last year was 4-8, not very good. McElwain's like, man, we got to do better than that. I was not very good. We're not very good. Fans deserve better than this. We're going to be better. McElwain's been a pretty good coach. 2 years ago, 9-4. They were 9-4, the Chippewas were. They almost beat Missouri 2 years ago. They went to the Sun Bowl. I think it's like the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl or something like that. Went to the Sun Bowl in El Paso, and they beat Washington State. So he's beaten FBS teams in the past, and the defense last year was pretty good. They've graduated a few guys. I just was looking a little bit at their game last year against Penn State, and against Penn State they showed multiple fronts early on. 4 down, under. I'm sorry, let me look at my notes. It's a 4 down over with a 3 technique to the strong side. That's what an over is. And, you know, a wide defensive end on the tight end rather than being an under with a Sam linebacker over the tight end. But then they did some 3 down under. So 4 down over, 3 down under, like 2 plays later. They're showing like a 30, and the nose tackle, he won gaps and makes tackle for loss. And the 2 defensive ends next to him, they're kind of in a 4-eye over the guards. It wasn't, well, one was a tackle, was a guard. It wasn't a bear. They 2 gapping. So you have 3 down linemen. The 2 on the outside, careful. The 2 on the outside are 2 gapping and 1 on the inside. Swim, 1 gap, makes a play in the backfield. A little bit original there, but that's what Tucker was talking about yesterday with multiple fronts. So that's one thing that they've done well. Their defense was hot and cold last year. If their defense is good physically and athletically, they might be able to move some pictures and create some problems up front. Michigan State, with problems blocking at tight end, if they continue to have those problems, that could be a problem. Can Michigan State's offensive line handle that and get things going against a Mid-America Conference defense? You would hope so. It needs to happen in this game, right? I heard in the second scrimmage that Michigan State's offense was kind of beaten by the defense, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all. But now you're not going against the Michigan State defense. You're going against the Central Michigan defense. And even with moving pictures and moving parts, can Michigan State still impose their will, establish the run, get some play action going, or pass to set up the run, all those things with balance. So if Michigan State does well on offense, I think they will be doing it against a good, solid representative sparring partner of a defense. On offense, I got to wait to see what the quarterbacks look like. They had a quarterback last year that lost his job at the end of the year, transferred to Florida Atlantic. Then they've got Bert Emanuel Jr. and Bauer, a couple of guys that are more run-oriented quarterbacks. Bert Emanuel only played 4 games last year and rushed for like 490 yards. Had like 275 against somebody. It was either Buffalo or Western Michigan. Western Michigan was the snow game. Athletic guy with some thickness, long strider type of guy. Good running quarterback. I got to watch a little bit more to see what those guys look like throwing the ball. The guy that left, that lost the job, went to Florida Atlantic, not a real good passer. Had a wind up and just not a real good passer. So I'm not sure Central Michigan has the throw game to really make this a dangerous game for Michigan State. It's always dangerous when it's Central Michigan, and game 1 is always dangerous in a lot of ways because we don't know what Michigan State is. We don't know what Central is. So with that comes some apprehension. It's like Tucker said, we're not good enough to take anyone lightly. We will never be good enough to take anyone lightly. So they're not planning to take anyone lightly. They're showing up to be enthusiastic about winning this game, and they need to have enthusiasm to just slam the door on a Central Michigan team that's going to bring a lot of fight. But I don't think Central's got the quarterback situation. I got to watch a little bit more. I've not watched enough. But you're asking what they do well. Defense, they have some players. They'll move around a little bit, make things a little bit tricky for a new quarterback to see the fronts and get in the right play or get out of the wrong play. Defensively, last year against Penn State, they were not a team that's going to come up and press and send everybody with a single safety deep. More likely, cushions, making you complete passes in front of them, trying to survive and elongate the game, shorten the game on the clock, stay in it longer, not give up the big 80-yarder, make you go 10, 12 plays if they're good enough on defense to make you go 10 or 12. So a lot of movement up front, a lot of different looks, but in the back, kind of conservative, trying to hang in it. That's what it looks like to me, but I've got some more to watch there, but thanks for the question. Desert Spartan 1 says, can we expect a flea flicker for the first offensive play of the 2023 season? You know, the flea flicker worked real well when you had number 9 back there, K9, Kenneth Walker. He was such a threat. The defenses came up trying to stop him. So handoff, getting rid of it, play action deep. And you had Jalen Naylor as a deep threat. So when you've got that kind of personnel, yes. Now, is Jalen Berger that type of threat? Not really. Could Nathan Carter become that kind of threat? Maybe. That's what we're going to try to find out. In terms of deep threats, you know, Montori Foster had a 52-yarder, I think, off the flea flicker against Maryland 2 years ago. I think Foster's going to be a pretty good deep threat. Not Jalen Naylor, but I think he's going to be pretty good. Maybe better than pretty good. That's one of the X factors for the season. I'm curious to see what Montori Foster is going to look like. Ricardo Cooney had a story about Montori Foster at SpartanMag.com this morning, and I added some things to it as well. You know, Montori Foster is a guy that, an interesting guy. As a lot of you know, focused on basketball at Cleveland St. Ed, Lakewood St. Ed, up until his senior year, decided to play football, had a really good senior year. Michigan State got in on him late, brought him in, late addition to the class. Had a big senior year, hadn't played football, was completely off the radar. Michigan State takes him, D'Antonio retires, year 1 of Mel Tucker, Montori Foster is a true freshman on the field. Started a game when Jalen Naylor was hurt as a true freshman, and this is after only his second year of organized football. Now, he played some Little League football. I consider organized football everything from 9th grade up, okay? Second year of organized football, he's starting at Michigan State at wide receiver. I don't think he caught any passes, but he had a start. It's only a 7-game season in 2020. 2021, Naylor gets hurt. Foster's in there, starts 3 or 4 games, 12 catches, touchdown against Maryland. Second year of organized football, you're like, this guy's got a ceiling of potential. He's going to be good later on. I mean, this guy's steep incline of improvement. Then last year in the spring, prior to the season, injured his foot, top of his foot, surgery, played hurt all last year. It really hampered his performance. Only about 12 catches last year. He said there were screws in his foot, really bothered him. Screws were removed in January. He said his foot felt better immediately as soon as the screws were out. Had a real good spring. And that's when Keon was still on the team. Keon's gone. Now they really need Foster with Trey Mosley to be starting receivers. Who's the third starter? I think it's going to be Mosley and Foster. Who's the third starter? Maybe Alante Brown, the transfer from Nebraska. But someone like Foster, is he just like an okay guy? Or is he a guy that can come in and get 60 catches? Because we don't really know what he is. Because he was looking like, man, that's a steep slope of improvement. Then boom, foot injury. Now what is he? He made some plays in the spring, made some plays this August. Not really sure. That's an intriguing X factor for the offense of this team, Montori Foster. Let's go back to the mailbag, the questions that were posted over at SpartanMag.com, the Underground Bunker message board. What do we have here? Question number 4 from Slippery Rock Sparty. He says, do you think Tucker can achieve Big Ten championship or college football playoff quality football at Michigan State with the necessary NIL demand being so high for both football and the basketball programs? Fair question. Do I think he can achieve Big Ten championship level play, college football playoff quality football? Now, the playoff is going to be 12 teams in the future. So if you're third place in the Big Ten, that's probably going to get you in. Can he do it? Yes, he can. That's different than predicting, will he do it? But yes, he can. Now, that being said, winning a Big Ten title in the coming years is going to be as hard as winning a national championship, almost. It's going to be like the SEC and the Big. You got to beat Ohio State and Michigan right now. Michigan's been good for 18 months. So winning the Big Ten right now, you got to be one of the top 5 teams in the country. Very hard to do. Harder than it's been in previous decades. Can he do it? Tucker showed in 2021 that when he has good talent, he can get the most out of them. That team went, 11-2, won the Peach Bowl, New Year's Six. Kenneth Walker was great, but the talent on the roster was not 11-2. They got every single thing they could get out of the roster that year. He's proved that if he has good talent, he can win at a high clip and maybe even at a clip above the aggregate level of talent on the roster. That's to be commended. Very good that year in that regard. Good communicator with his players, motivator. They've had some ups and downs. They've never, and with a lot of transfer portal talent on the team, and the cohesion has remained pretty good. I've never seen anything but collectiveness. That's to be commended. That's not easy to do. So what Tucker needs to continue to do is make good hires when delegating. Everything from dietitians to strength coach to player personnel people, putting the roster together. Defensive back coaches, all these things. You gotta, if you have loose screws anywhere in there with this schedule, things can go a little haywire. But he's shown he can really navigate and motivate and get good return when he has a good roster. Even in 2020, when he didn't have a good roster, jumped up and upset Michigan. Turned out Michigan wasn't very good, but that was a colossal upset at the time. Northwestern was very good that year. They came to Spartan Stadium, Michigan State beat them. So Michigan State's shown they can rise up and beat some of those teams. What they need to do, like Tucker said in Indianapolis, have to win the winnable games as well, of course, to get the wins to add up. You can't be wildly inconsistent. So that's the next step for Tucker right now with Michigan State. So we talked about the tent poles, NIL, and the 3-star recruiting and 3-star recruiting outside the radius and 4-star recruiting outside the radius and 4-star recruiting in the radius, those things. The portal also, but I didn't talk about the portal. Michigan State needs to be perfect in those things in order to get what you're talking about. Win a Big Ten championship, which puts you in the national top 5. You got to be perfect, near perfect, like D'Antonio was as he built toward the run from 2013 to 2015. Now, Ohio State and LSU, schools like that, they don't have to be close to perfect. They can just kind of do their usual machinery, and their roster is going to look great every year no matter what, turnkey. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfect with evaluation. They have to be very good with evaluation. They have to choose the right 4 stars because they got nothing but 4 stars wanting to go to those places. They got to choose the correct ones, and they have to develop them, and you have to have a good mix. I'm not sure Ohio State had a great mix the last couple of years. Maybe too many Sun Belt players on offense. They did not play well in cold weather. Call me crazy. I think that's a factor. So you got to choose the right ones and build your team and all that. But they don't have to be perfect to get in the playoff. Those schools don't. Those turnkey schools. Now, that doesn't mean they're guaranteed to be great all the time, but they don't have to be perfect. Michigan State has to be perfect to get those tent poles erected and to get the type of things you're talking about, competing for Big Ten titles and so forth. Tony in Northville, he says, how big a factor do you believe Jaron Mangum will be in short yardage situations? Jaron Mangum. Big back, 235 now. He always wanted to be a Spartan. He's excited. He says he's going to be really fired up to take the field in a Michigan State uniform. Something he's always wanted to do. So I think his level of excitement and motivation is going to be great. And, that's a guy that had 15 touchdowns at South Florida a couple of years ago. So he has that He can smell the goal line, and Michigan State's going to need that. So I think he's going to get Berger over 600 yards rushing last year, and he'll get his touches, of course. But they get a short yardage against Central Michigan. I wouldn't be surprised if Mangum gets a call to go in there and try to bust it through and get that established as they get into the season. Now, I'm not sure about the entire running back picture. He will at some point in the season. I'll just leave it at that. Maybe it will be in game one. But yes, I do think he's a factor in short yardage, and I think he'll be a plus. And I think the offensive line is going to be pretty good, so I think Michigan State in short yardage will be pretty good. And they need that because there's some short yardage situations last year that got away from them a little bit. All those little things, important factors as you're trying to put a team together, a season together. Let's go back over here to the comments area. Jason G says comp will go down as the best. Those are nice comments. Appreciate that, G. Jason G. I'm not going to repeat that, but thank you. J.J. McKay, 6Man1, says checking in from Keweenaw County, the top of Michigan, go green, up there in the Lake Superior country. Appreciate J.J. McKay. He's here every week. He has good attendance. That'll help his grade at the end of the semester. J.J. McKay says, just finished watching your videos on Galladay. Talking about Halliday and Mosley. Halliday, there you go. Illest Eggplant says, linebacker pass coverage scares me a little bit. Well, don't be scared. Don't be scared. Halliday and Windman move well. They're experienced, mature. And I'll remind you that Windman played middle linebacker last year for 2 games. Prior to that, he was a linebacker at UNLV, I think as a sophomore. Only 2 games at linebacker, and he had an interception against Wisconsin. It was a big play. 45-degree drop, zone coverage, interception. I think it was zone. But don't be afraid. Don't assume it's going to be bad. I'm not assuming it's going to be bad. But you're right. I mean, all those things are important. Now, if you're talking about the nickel, that needs to be better in pass coverage. Angelo Gross has had some ups and downs. That needs to come around. J.J. McKay has my back on that with the German Shepherd there in the Keweenaw, saying Jacoby and Halliday are good cover linebackers. We'll wait and see. Fleet's clocked in. J.J. McKay says being able to keep the safeties back should help. Being able to keep the safeties back, that's what Tucker was talking about at the press conference a couple weeks ago after the first scrimmage. He wants to be able to play 2 safeties deep. He wants to be able to stop the run with the standard number up front, whether it's a front 6 or front 7, depending on what the offense is bringing them. Meaning that 1 or 2 guys in that front 6 need to defeat a block or command 2 blockers, which makes the number situation favorable for you that you can keep 2 safeties back. If you have guys beating blocks and commanding double teams, then the numbers become as such that you can keep 2 safeties back. And then you're playing with gas, you're playing with house money, or you're cooking with gas. If you know, you know. All right, Rob South says, what's up, fellas? Rob South is late. J.J. McKay says, hey, Rob. Slim Pickens says, checking in from Bradenton, Florida. It's been rainy and breezy here. Go green. Bradenton, yeah, they got the hurricane coming in that way, right? I've not checked the path on that lately, but hold tight. Rooting for you down there. We've had some crazy weather through here. We've had 3 tornadoes in the last 3 weeks. One went barreling down I-96 last Wednesday night. And there was some loss of life around here, so our thoughts go out to those people for sure. That was scary. I knew some people that were coming through that thing. And a couple cars flipped on I-96. By the way, while I'm at it, shout out to Tanya. We're rooting for you. Big Michigan State fan, originally from Great Britain. Became a Michigan State fan because your man is a Michigan State fan, MSU 66. And Tanya's battling, but we're rooting like heck for her. And we think that Spartan's going to be strong. So, Tanya, this whole broadcast is for you. You hang strong. Dedicated to you. Rooting for you. All right. All right. Marlon Milano says, Spartan, what up? SpartanMag fam. Mark Webster says, hello from East Lansing. So ready for a tailgate on Friday. Game week finally. Sea-Dog. The big programs are just simply outbidding the medium-sized program. It is only going to get worse in the future, in my opinion. Could get worse. The big programs might change as we go forward. Alabama was able to put together the best rosters in football previously. You know that. I don't think they can spend with A&M and Oklahoma and Texas. I don't think they can spend with Michigan when Michigan wants to. Can they spend with USC? Remains to be seen. So Alabama's chances of having a better roster than everybody else, that's going to be difficult. So there will be, like you said, the big programs, but it might not be Alabama and Clemson anymore like it was in the last few years. Clemson's going to have trouble spending with some of these programs. They had a great run as a powerhouse, from 2014 to 2020 or so. So there will be power programs, but the names of those programs might change. A&M has great funding, but they've never been able to get out of their own way. Texas, all kinds of talent, all kinds of advantages. They've never quite been able to get their engine running properly. Occasionally they do, right? LSU seems to rise up, and then they crash. Then they rise up, then they crash. With Brian Kelly there, they're going to be strong. Everybody knows that. Georgia's strong. Everybody knows that. USC is going to be interesting. They got a great offensive coach. What are they going to be with NIL? Don't know. Michigan, they've done a good job of holding on to players with NIL. They've got access to a lot of money. It's going to be interesting to see if Harbaugh's there after this year. A lot of people think he might not be, but so Sea-Dog is right. I think big programs are simply going to be outbidding the medium-sized programs, but in a matter in one way or another, it's been like that for a number of years, right? J.J. McKay says they should be using TV money for paying players, and NCAA should have a salary cap. Well, if you do that, you're talking about collective bargaining, which some people think it's headed in that direction, and put players under contract. And if you do that, at some point, you know what you're gonna have? At some point, you're gonna have a strike. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Sea-Dog says, we probably lost Stone due to a huge NIL offer from Oklahoma. Maybe. I mean, Michigan State had been showing him a lot of interest in that category all along. Is Michigan State able to outspend Oklahoma? Maybe not. That's a guy that wants to stay close to home in Oklahoma, possibly. Do you need to outspend Oklahoma by 20% to get him? Maybe. I don't know. J.J. McKay says some people who Stone played with went to Oklahoma too, and his sister's there. That had to do with it besides money. Good point. It's at one point, Stone indicated around 12 months ago that he was kind of almost a silent commit to Michigan State. Some people around here were saying we're counting the chickens as if, dude, he's already in the hopper. It's happening. And he gave Michigan State that indication, but now he gives a promise ring to Oklahoma. More likely he's going to stick with Oklahoma. But I tell you what, if Oklahoma goes out there and goes 5-7 again, there's going to be some heat on Venables, and that thing could shake loose again. Let's go back over here to the mailbag. D. Javier with an interesting question. I don't know if this will bore some of you or not. He says, Jim, please describe your typical Game 1 routine. What's my Game 1 routine? He says Rocky Balboa, for example, would go visit his priest and get blessed, and that was a priority before his fight. I don't anticipate doing that. He says, what time do you get started on the way to the stadium? Do you walk to the stadium or drive? Do you stop by tailgates beforehand? Do you take in any of the pageantry? Yes, I do. I usually want to get there an hour and a half before kickoff, but I'm usually running late because I might be up late the night before or doing this or doing that, running kids around, maybe if they've got a game or something. But yeah, usually I want to go check out tailgate, see Butch and BJ and those guys, and Andreski if he's in town, B-Bird, some of those clowns, even Nils, if we can get his sorry butt up here from Texas. Some of you others might happen too. So I usually get there, and And I usually get there like 11 minutes, and I'm there for like 11 minutes. Might get something to eat, might talk some X's and O's, then I got to get back to the stadium. I want to get to the stadium and watch pregame because that gives you an idea of what's going on with the depth chart. So I want to see that. Sometimes I want to see who's healthy. So pregame is important. So I want to tailgate and then check out pregame. I park over by the computer building, the old computer building. It's like a building from the 1940s or something, the computer building, maybe the 50s. There's a parking garage there, and I request to park there because I like to park there, and I enjoy the walk across the Red Cedar, over by Wells Hall, the trees along the Red Cedar, to the stadium, approaching it from the east. And then the guys that I know that tailgate are tailgating in Breslin, which is not perfect for me because I got to walk all the way to Breslin, hang out over there for a minute, and then walk back. I'll tell you what, when I'm on my way over there, several times as I'm walking on that sidewalk in front of Munn Ice Arena, I'll pass the basketball contingent. Mark Montgomery, Thomas Kelly, Tom Izzo, those guys, Steve Smith sometimes. You'll see those guys coming and going, so that's part of the pageantry, if you will. So that's good. And around that time, if I'm going late, and as I cross the northern part of the stadium, the tunnel where the band is entering, I usually try to get there before the band does because a few times I've not gotten there in time, and then the ropes go up, and you have to wait for the band to go in. I'm trying to get over to the tailgate. It's kind of like when they've got a cattle crossing on Ormond Road in Davisburg, Michigan when I was growing up. Just got to stop and wait. So, yeah, I try to take in. I don't want to park. I could park in Breslin, but I don't want to park in Breslin. I want to park over there, and I want to walk. And then when I walk there after the game, when everything's empty, that's kind of cool too. So I enter the stadium. I try to get in there. You know, I want to get in there 40 minutes before kickoff, but I never make it happen because I'm at the tailgate. And I'll be at a tailgate this Friday. I assume BJ's going to be tailgating over there. Butch is not. He's going to be in Canada. It's his birthday weekend. He never goes to the Labor Day game. Understandable. So anyway, and when I do that, you know, sometimes I'll stop at a tailgate here and there if I recognize people. Those are good times. So he asks, is there assigned seating? Yes, there is assigned seating. In the press box, he says, do I eat the spread that's provided or pack my own? Is the spread deliciousness? No, it's not delicious. I do pack my own because I have to go gluten-free, unfortunately, which is not convenient. So Michigan State used to have the best food in the Big Ten, but now they just kind of sausage it, you know, brats, hot dogs, that type of thing. And he says, what's your post-game end of day look like? What time do you leave the stadium? I usually leave the stadium about 3.5 hours after the game. Sometimes I'm the last guy to leave. Sometimes I got other things I need to do, and I'll come home and work. But, you know, if there's a night game and the game's over at midnight, I mean, we're in there late. You know, sometimes Nils might call or something. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm still at the stadium. He goes, you're still at the stadium? The game's been over a long time. I tell you what, the best late game scene I've ever seen was the Penn State snow globe game, Thanksgiving weekend in 2021. Everybody remembers the snow, just constant. And after the game was over, the lights stayed on in the stadium, and it just continued to snow and snow and snow and snow, and it just snow globe. You know, there's so much glass up there in the press box, of course. It was just, it was kind of beautiful. I wish I'd have taken some pictures or some video while that was going on. Probably a one-time deal. To see that kind of snow at night. He says, last part of this, in the press box are journalists that cheer for any team ever escorted out. No, I've never witnessed that. They do say no cheering, and you might get like once or twice something might happen, and then they remind everybody no cheering. The exception is the Notre Dame press box because they got a bunch of old-timers in there like former players, and there's no shame in there of some people cheering. So that's about the only place where it's kind of allowed. Question number 7, Desert Sparty from Ahwatukee, Arizona. I have to text Mooby. We got Crowley coming in pretty soon too. Crowley's ready at probably right now, but we're gonna hold off and wait for Mooby. Let me give him the number in case he doesn't have it. All right. And let's see. Should I just open it up? I might just open it up. Do we have any? I'm not seeing any trolls. I got to keep an eye on that, but I'm not seeing any. Yeah, we'll open it up if anyone wants to call in. And we'll get Crowley on a little bit later. And maybe Mooby. Not sure anyone wants to call, but in case anyone does, we'll do that. Crowley is ready. He's making fun of my gluten-free situation. It's understandable. I can take it. All right. We're going to wait a little bit longer for Mooby. I just texted him. We'll see if he says anything. Where are we at here? I went down too far. I got to get back to question number 7. Oh, yeah. Desert Sparty from Ahwatukee, Arizona. Ahwatukee. All right, he says, who's your pick to win the Big Ten West and the East this year? The East? I don't know. I'll go with Ohio State. West, a lot of people, I think Wisconsin is a popular pick. Tanner Mordecai coming in from SMU. I watched him a little bit for SMU last year against Washington, maybe, or Minnesota. I watched him against somebody that Michigan State played early. He's got some ability. So Wisconsin going with the air raid. It's air raid, but it's spread air raid, but it's kind of a spread to run. Spread to run. North Carolina a couple of years ago, Phil Longo is the coordinator that they brought in from North Carolina. A couple of years ago, North Carolina had 2 1,000-yard rushers in the same season with the air raid. So it's called air raid, but do not expect Wisconsin to be throwing it around like Mike Leach, Texas Tech. Stroker making a call to the bullpen. All right, I tell you what, we're gonna go with all right, I'm gonna tell Mooby that all right, Crowley, if you're watching, go ahead and call in right now. I texted Mooby and told him we'd catch him next time. But Mooby still might. But if Mooby didn't, it's 10:20 here Eastern time, and if he didn't call in, then he said he was 90% sure. But if he couldn't make it, then he's not going to make it. What I told him is not going to I think he's already not available. So the Mooby fans that are out there, don't be second guessing my quarterback call on this whole thing. But I think we're going to have Crowley calling in here in a second. I assume my phone is working. We'll find out here shortly. But Wisconsin, I'm not sure they're going to be great. Luke Fickell, the new coach. Wisconsin last year, they were okay. Went to a bowl game. Michigan State upset them. I think they went to a bowl game. Fired the coach, Christ, and all that. But their offensive line, I think, was the worst Wisconsin offensive line I had seen since 1992.
Call from
Crowley Sullivan from
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
All right, we're going to go out to sunny California, out to Pasadena, California. We're going to bring in Mr. Crowley Sullivan. Some of you might know who he is. Some of you might not, but it doesn't matter if you don't know him or not. You'll get an idea of what he's all about here in a moment. He's a big, enthusiastic Spartan observer. He's a 25-year veteran of the sports media industry. Spent 10 years at ESPN where he won 2 Emmys and a Peabody Award for his work as a producer for the iconic series Sports Century on ESPN. As an executive, he led ESPN Classic and ESPN News programming and served as an executive producer for ESPN Original Entertainment. He's also served as EVP General Manager, Executive Vice President, General Manager of Campus Insiders. He's been a USA Today sports contributor, and now he oversees UFC Fight Pass as its VP and GM. And like I said earlier, one time he had lunch and dinner for 26 straight days at the Peanut Barrel. And like I said earlier in the show, I'd like to see Joe DiMaggio attempt that. But all that aside, Crowley Sullivan is on the show, and he's a bull in the china shop, and it's football season, and he's ready to roll. Crowley from Pasadena, welcome to the show, my friend. Happy new football season. Happy New Year 2023. How you doing, Crowley Sullivan?
I couldn't be better. I mean, listening to you read that off, it made me seem like I actually am important or something.
You are important.
That was wonderful. And I never knew you were gluten free. I've been to the Peanut Barrel with you countless times, and I've seen you eat the food there. I don't think Peanut Barrel serves gluten free food.
When I was with you at the Peanut Barrel last December, you may recall that I did not eat. If you think back, and if you were hypnotized, you might remember that. I think I didn't.
Well, I actually do remember that. I do remember that you didn't eat, but I've been there many times with you before, and I swear I've seen you eat something in the past. By the way, I have no problem with the gluten-free. That's zero issue.
Well, if I do a hamburger, I'll do a hamburger without the bun, and that's usually good enough. But it's inconvenient. It's a pain in the rear. No pun intended.
Do you go just with the plant-based food?
Meat and fruit, my friend. Meat and fruit. Give me the rotisserie chicken. Give me steak. Give me a walleye, blueberries. I basically eat like a black bear.
Walleye is great fish. That's great fish.
Yes, it is.
By the way, you ever have swordfish?
Yes, it's good, and it's more of a dense fish. Would you agree?
Yes, it's like a fillet. It's like an actual fillet.
Yeah, walleye and perch. I'm a walleye perch, Great Lakes type of guy. The walleye, I like it in the Great Lakes, but it might be a little cleaner way up in northern Minnesota at Lake of the Hills, Lake of the Woods,
Yeah.
Lake of the Woods up there out toward Winnipeg, which I'm kind of hoping to get up there first time ever for some ice fishing this winter, but it remains to be seen. The weather wasn't so great last year, and my guide up there still remains to be seen, but I got that on the bucket list. Things I can do now that I'm no longer a hockey dad. I might have some open weekends. We're going to wait and see. But anyway, football. Crowley Sullivan. What I want out of you, and I mentioned this earlier, sometimes at SpartanMag.com, and make sure to give us a like here on the channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go over to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. Over at SpartanMag.com, increasingly, what we try to do a little bit more of is opinion pieces from all of our staff members, including myself. We'll do something called a 3 and out, like 3 quick thoughts and out. It's because SpartanMag.com is now part of the On3 system, the On3 network. So 3 and out, it's a 3 theme. So I've challenged Crowley Sullivan. I've assigned him to come on the show initially, and I want to get a 3 and out from him, and we'll just see where the conversation goes from there. So Crowley Sullivan, I hope I didn't overdo it there a little bit, but you got a 3 and out for me?
I appreciate it.
Give me your 3 and out.
Yeah,
what are you thinking?
I have a 3 and out, but can I first just thank you for all that you do for all of us through Spartan Mag, you, Paul, and the whole staff. I don't know what we do without everything that you guys crank out all the time. It's the absolute best in the business. And all of us love the VCast. We love Spartan Live. I love Spartan Mag so much. I can't tell you how much I used to wait in anticipation for the newspaper to arrive in my mailbox.
Yeah.
I'm one of the early OG subscribers, and I loved it so much. So just before we get the season started here, I know everybody agrees with me. Just thank you for all that you do, JC. And that goes for the legend Paul as well.
Paul is a legend.
Thank you.
Paul is a legend. We've had some great people working for us over the years. Matt Dorsey, of course, another legendary figure. We've gotten a lot of great work from a lot of great people. And we thank the readers, the subscribers that have made all this possible. Spartan Magazine began in 1991. I became affiliated with it in 93, became owner in, 2000. And then the internet was running full bore by then, morphed it over to SpartanMag.com. And it's been it's been a lot of fun and still churning after it and still chasing it and still growing. And we appreciate all the SpartanMag subscribers that allow us to keep growing and growing. And we could always use more subscribers so we can grow some more and have some and reinvest with more writers and employ more people to cover the Spartans like the Michigan State fans want and deserve. So thanks to the fans and thanks for your nice words, Crowley Sullivan. Appreciate that. What's going on, man? What do you think?
Last thing, you've given me great opportunity to write a whole bunch of pieces that I've loved doing, and I started writing something that I was going to send you this week, just as sort of like an overview, big picture, macro kind of a look at the season ahead. And what I've done here in responding to your assignment, I've sort of touched on some of the things that I was going to touch on in the piece. So what are we calling this? 3 and out?
3 and out.
All right, first down, the trenches.
Yeah.
You ready?
Oh, yeah.
So in Mark D'Antonio's 4th season, he led State to his first of what would end up being 3 Big Ten championships. It was a co-championship with Wisconsin, and the Badgers went to the Rose Bowl. State's reward that season for that Big Ten championship was a Capital One Bowl matchup with Alabama, where Alabama absolutely demolished the Spartans 49-7, and it wasn't even that close.
Right.
After that game, Coach D famously said, as you will recall, we need to prioritize beefing up everything in the trenches.
That's right.
In order to take the next step. He
right.
talked a lot about that. And he did that. And he did it on both sides of the ball. 3 seasons later, State won the Big Ten championship, won the Rose Bowl, continued its absolute domination over the rival, and finished number 3 in the country. It took D'Antonio 4 seasons to even realize that his program was going to hinge on the ability to dominate games in the trenches. When Coach Tucker took over, he was taking over a program that I don't think it's unfair to say had just run out of gas. And understandably so. I mean, Mark D'Antonio, I don't know if there's a human on earth that loves him and respects him more than I do. He just kind of ran out of gas. Mm-hmm. And the program particularly started to fall off in the trenches. And so Tucker, since he came on board, has emphasized this. You and Paul nailed it this week on the VCast when you spent meaningful time talking about how the offensive line is where the program vision of Tucker has maybe come into focus more than any other part of the program. State now has guys who have developed after being recruited. There is major size, major athleticism, speed, versatility, and very real depth. On defense, the trenches have not been this big, stout, talented, fast, tough, and deep in a long, long time. And I know that you guys aren't that crazy about the talent in a guy like Jarrett Jackson or Jalen Sammy and some of the other guys, but these are 6'6", 6'7", 330-pounders who are going to be backups for guys like Simeon Barrow, Derek Harmon, and Maverick Hansen. And the guys on the edge are big-time college football players. Zion Young, Chris Bogle, Brandon Wright, Tubise Adelaide. We're all going to have to get used to that name. Avery Dunn. And that's not even including the newcomers. So, in the trenches this season, we're going to see big-time improvement. And to put a capper on this first down take here, it's going to lead to the rushing attack for Michigan State being in the top 5 of the Big Ten and the rushing defense being in the top 5 in the Big Ten. That's your first down right there, Tom.
Wow, okay. So if Michigan State is in the top 5 in the Big Ten in rush defense and rush offense, I think that sounds like a 7-5 type of team at least, depending on what the kicking game looks like and, whether they can take care of the ball. And if they are that, that's the type of 7-5 season you can grow from. That's That's the type of blocking and tackling you need to harness the consistency that is needed to set up a base camp of a program that's in that 7-5, 8-4, 9-3 area where you can, from that base camp, once in a while, you can try to scale Everest. And if
it's
statistically,
foundational.
yes, and from
It's foundational.
and I mean, some of those players still have to prove themselves. You make some good points about, as D'Antonio grew the program, it took a while to get strong enough in the defensive trenches to stand up to the best teams, and in the offensive trenches as well. I'd go back even a year earlier, or 2 years earlier, when Brian Hoyer was a senior when Michigan State went out to Penn State with a chance to win a share of the Big Ten title. And Penn State controlled the trenches and won comfortably. And even though Michigan State had a good season and good talent at the skill positions and a few good defensive players here and there, in the trenches against Penn State, they did not have enough. And they weren't good enough to win a Big Ten title, and Penn State showed that to them, and that was a learning point. Even the year that they were kind of blown out by Iowa, they ran into a similar problem. When Michigan State went to Iowa, I think with like an 8-0 record, and it was like Michigan State
37-7 was the final score.
Yeah, Michigan State was undefeated deeper into the season than at any point since the 60s. Went to Iowa, and among other things, Iowa was too strong in the trenches. Michigan State couldn't move them, couldn't get the ground game going, and Iowa's defensive front also controlled the day. So those two games, Iowa and Penn State, Michigan State didn't have it. Michigan State became better and was able to play better against some of those teams and within the Big Ten. But you're right, when they played at Alabama that day, just couldn't match up. And I will say, even when Michigan State was at their best in 2013, that was a team that might have been as good as any team in the country. Maybe could have won a national championship game if they'd been matched up with Auburn or Florida State that year, finished number 3 in the country in 2013. I'm still not sure Michigan State ever got to the point in the trenches, even with those great seasons, that they would have been able to go toe-to-toe with that Alabama team that they played in the Florida Bowl game. Was that the Citrus Bowl, I think? I think that
Capital One.
That Capital One Alabama team with 2 losses, I think, was better than the Alabama team that won the national title that Michigan State played in the Cotton Bowl in the college football playoff. If there had been a 12-team playoff back then, that Alabama team would have won the national title as well. That Alabama team was up on Auburn by like 3 touchdowns with Ingram running down the sideline to go up by 4 touchdowns, and his elbow hit his knee and he fumbled it. Auburn recovered. They had Cam Newton. They came back. Alabama had some injuries in the backfield, defensive backfield, and Auburn ended up coming back and winning that game, and Auburn won the national title. But that Alabama team, they had McElroy, who was an experienced national championship quarterback. They had Ingram.
Yes.
They had who was the wide receiver? Just embarrassment of riches everywhere. And although that team lost 2 games,
it was like a pro team.
They lost 2 games, and on that day, a lot of times teams go to bowl games and they're disappointed and they don't play well, like when Auburn lost to Central Florida, or last year there's another SEC team that wasn't interested, so they lost their bowl game. Alabama has been uninterested and lost bowl games in the past to Oklahoma and Utah. But this game, with Saban going against Michigan State, he managed to make sure that they were up for that game for a lot of reasons. And that was a very talented team that had stubbed their toe earlier in the season. But that team on that day was the best college football team I've ever seen with my own eyes, and they were not a national champion.
Yeah,
and I've seen several national champions over the years. I've probably seen 8 or 9 of them, maybe not that many. I've seen a lot. That was a better Alabama team than the team that was in the Cotton Bowl that won a national title in 2015. So I'm not sure they ever got to the level, but Alabama certainly drove home the point that Michigan State had a long way to go in that regard. But I like it. And also, and Michigan State had gotten softer in the trenches, especially on the offensive line, late in D'Antonio's era.
Yes.
D-line, I'd have to remember that. I'm not for sure.
They were still tough. No, they were still tough. You had Willikis and that whole gang still performing at a high level, but I don't know that the defensive line towards the end there had the depth and I don't know that it necessarily had the size either. I mean,
Right.
this defensive line here, it's big, fast, athletic, tough. There's nothing soft about this situation in the trenches. And you could really say the same thing about the offensive line. You know, when Tucker came in and Jarrett Horst was supposedly going to be this anchor on I think he was the left tackle. He isn't sniffing, the field now if he's on the roster.
Maybe
On the
not.
offensive line.
Maybe. I mean, we still have to see Brandon Baldwin if he can come around at left tackle. Brandon Baldwin, last time we saw him in the Penn State game, did not play well that day, but he's responded well to the competition from Keyshawn Blackstock coming in as a junior college recruit, so there's been good competition there. Kapilovic told me, and he's mentioned in the press conferences, that he told me this at midsummer and reiterated it during August camp. He expects to play 2 offensive tackles. Ethan Boyd has really closed the gap on Spencer Brown. They're both pretty good. Baldwin has gotten better, needed to get better, partly because he wasn't quite good enough last year when he replaced Horst. He was okay. And then with Blackstock coming along, and Blackstock's got some talent, but he's had a lot to learn as he goes. But Kapilovic expects all 4 of those tackles to play. So
I think they will.
And they've in 2021 they had a number of offensive linemen. They were able to move guys in and out. But offensive tackle, they've always been a little squeamish about whether they take people out or not. Now, before they can start taking people in and out, maybe they'll get better play because they'll be fresh there at tackle. I'm not, right tackle is going to be pretty good. I'm not convinced that left tackle is going to be excellent. I think it'll be functional. I think Brandon Baldwin was functional most of the time. Should be better than that. And if Keyshawn Blackstock's good enough to get on the field against him, left tackle should be functional. That doesn't mean that they'll be able to play Penn State and block all those guys that they send at you. But most games, left tackle should be good enough. Get back to what you're talking about on defense. Tucker said, when Tucker came to Michigan State, he talked about, I know what a championship team looks like. He saw it at Georgia, saw it at Alabama. He's coached against them. And size has a lot to do with it. He came to Michigan State, looked on the roster, it did not have the size, among other things. And playing defense at the tight end, over the tight end, teams are just too strong out there. Jeff Pietrowski was a pretty good player, but not quite big enough for what they were looking for, and some other defensive ends that they've had to use. So they've went out in the portal and into the recruiting, and they've gotten bigger up front. Zion Young is a good guy. I mentioned earlier, a 3-star recruit that.
He's a monster.
Yeah, and he's a star in the making.
I think he's a star in the making.
And Zion Young is a guy that I think is going to play really well this year, and he's a guy that Michigan State's going to have to give him some NIL compensation to keep him. That's just the name of the game. That's a guy from Florida that a lot of programs overlooked, and Michigan State's going to have to work to keep him. And that's just the name of the game. Nothing against him. That's just the way it's going to be. And I hear that Zion Young is getting better and better as a pass rusher. I've not really. When I look at him, I don't necessarily see that hip flexibility and ankle flexibility that you look for. But I hear from people trying to block him that he's just slippery for a big guy. Slippery. So
he's very athletic, very athletic and tough out against the run. And I just think he's a young guy. If you look at him on film from last season, especially go back and look at the Michigan game, he played very well in that game. The whole defense played very well in that game, by the way.
Yeah, they did.
But he's only going to get better. By the way, here's another guy that nobody really is talking about, but Avery Dunn is going to be a great role player who's going to be able to spell guys on the edge and play really functional and probably above functional football. By the way, really quickly on your comment on left tackle being functional with Baldwin, I don't know that you necessarily at this point need quote-unquote excellent play on every single play from your left tackle. If Baldwin plays functional to, plus player type play, that alone improves the offensive line, in my mind, dramatically from what it's been the last few years.
Right. By the way, Doors Fan 91 tells me Julio Jones was the wide receiver I was trying to think of, and he mentioned.
Oh, good call. Good call.
Yeah,
what a
and
player
he was great. Plus, Alabama did a great job with tactical holding on that play, as if they needed it. I mean, they were holding all the time, got away with it. And
I don't think that made any difference, though.
No, Doors Fan 91 points out that 10 of their starters that day were first-round draft picks.
Oh, my God. Wow,
I mean,
that's a great call.
Who
said that?
Doors Fan 91. Doors Fan 91.
Doors Fan 91. Way to go. That's awesome.
That's the best college football. That's the best college football team I've seen with my own eyes. And they were explosive that day, and Saban had them wired. For good reason. He's playing Michigan State. But 10 first-round draft picks, I know that they were, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. But they're, NFL teams don't have 10 first-round draft choices. Most NFL teams have
what team that was.
Yeah, most NFL teams have like 3 or 4 first-rounders that they keep. Some don't make it. And they to have 10, that's crazy.
But the thing about that game wasn't so much that Alabama boat raced Michigan State. They plowed over and through Michigan State throughout that game. It was destruction, and the overall sort of takeaway that D'Antonio that we've been talking about here, no shit. You need to get bigger and tougher in the trenches. And my overall point here is Tucker's been working on that since he got there. And this season, I think, is going to be the first season where you're going to see that all really come together and be the most tangible kind of manifestation of his vision for the program.
Well, Zion Young is, 6'6", 265. That's a big defensive end. 6'6", 265 is that's a big defensive end. Tumisi,
and he can move.
Yes, and he's slippery. It's hard to be slippery when you're that big, but they say he's slippery. So I'm looking forward to seeing what improvement he has as a true sophomore. Tumisi Adeleye, 6'4", 280. That's a big defensive end. It's a big defensive end. And
I like what you guys. I'm sorry. I was going to say I like what you and Paul were talking about on the VCast earlier this week about Brandon Wright. Totally agree with you. He's been kind of under the radar. That dude has turned into a good defensive end in my estimation.
Well, he, former running back, moved to defensive end, and was, for understandably, was kind of, kind of slow to figure it out. Had some loud moments here and there. Chased down a couple plays against Penn State in the snow game. Had a couple of sacks against Pittsburgh in the bowl game. Last year, I was kind of expecting a little bit more, but didn't happen initially. But against Wisconsin, had a sack and played pretty big. And I think that game might have been one of the best games he's had. And then the next week, he was caught up in the tunnel incident at the Michigan Stadium tunnel. So he was done. So he played his best game of the year, and then we didn't see him anymore. Is Brandon Wright possibly a starter? I think I wouldn't write him off as a candidate for that. Defensive line coach Deron Reynolds said that he didn't want the players to have a depth chart. He was just rolling guys in throughout August camp.
Right.
So, and he wanted to keep them on edge and keep them competing. And when I say Brandon Wright, he's competing for a starting job, I don't discount the possibility that he could start ahead of a Tumisi Adeleye or Chris Bogle.
I don't either. I don't know if we're going to see Adeleye start. I'm not. You've made a good point in the lead up to the season. What has he played in 2 or 3 football games since 2019?
2, I think 2.5.
Yeah,
right,
but I make no mistake. I'm thrilled at the addition of this guy, and I think because of the fact that he hasn't played much football, he's got to have a burning desire in him to show anybody and everybody that he earned that 5-star status as a high school recruit. But it won't surprise me one bit if he doesn't start for the first few games.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I hear that they're pretty happy with him, but there's a lack of experience there, and he's joining a team with experience. I mean, Zion Young is a true sophomore, and he's played way more football than Adeleye.
Yes.
Chris Bogle coming in from Florida. He only played 132 snaps last year. He's 6'4", 245.
I like him.
Played better.
I like him.
Played bigger than 245 last year, I thought, against the run. The pass rush, he had like 8 career sacks at Florida as a kind of a career second stringer type of guy. I think there is some pass rush ability there that we didn't quite see that we would have seen if he hadn't gotten hurt in the fourth game. And, I went back and watched a little bit of the Michigan State-Washington game from last year. And Bogle was Michigan State's best defensive end on that day. It was a rough day for Michigan State in a lot of ways, but Michigan State played hard to their credit. They were undermanned because of all the injuries from the first couple of weeks across the board.
Yeah.
You lose Xavier Henderson, lose Darius Snow, lose Slade, lost Pietrowski, lost a lot of players. All kinds of injuries, and Washington was outstanding, jumped out of that 16-0 lead or whatever it was. But Bogle had a big stop on fourth down to the goal line, played pretty well, and 1 week later he was lost for the season. But that's a mature guy coming back for a 5th or 6th year, whatever it is for Bogle. And he had it was a pretty tough injury, so he didn't play much in the spring. Deron Reynolds said they've got him on a little bit of a pitch count. They got to be smart with him, as he said. So Bogle. I'll be eager to see what he looks like. Does he, I think he's got the capacity to be a plus player defensive end if he's healthy. I don't know for sure if he's full blast. If he is full blast, I think he might start with Zion Young, Adeleye off the bench with Brandon Wright. Avery Dunn was a third stringer guy at the beginning of the year last year. Was miserable against Minnesota, just terrible when he had to play. By the end of the year, he was functional.
The whole team was.
Yeah, and he was just getting beat physically. Against Minnesota. Defensively, Michigan State was just in a spacious shell, and Tanner Morgan, an experienced quarterback, was just able to play darts and easily diagnose that thing against a defense that Michigan State tried to dumb it down because they had so many players out, and maybe they dumbed it down too much. I don't know. I mean, the coaches never said it on the record, but coming back from Washington, having lost all those players, the trip from out west. They don't ever want to. They're going to have to schedule like that with the West Coast teams coming to the Big Ten. But after that, they said we don't want to ever schedule.
It sapped them. It sapped the whole team emotionally, physically, everything.
And they played hard against Washington and lost. Came back against Minnesota.
They did. Sure, they did.
Didn't have as many players. Avery Dunn, who was third string, all of a sudden he's playing a lot of snaps, and he was not good enough that day. But by the end of the year, he was functional. He played 302 snaps. And, he's pretty solid. But you're right. I mean, I think Avery Dunn started a little bit last year. He could be a third string guy now and a pretty solid one. But there's size there. Tucker wanted to go toward this, more size up front, something that he feels a team has to have. Michigan State didn't have it. And, in the middle with Barrow and Hansen and, Derek Harmon, those are big guys. They're bringing Jalen Sami, a guy they knew from Colorado. Size, experience. Yeah. Get them on the same page. Different types of fronts. They can two gap and one gap and do multiple things, and they can be firm up there. Now,
yeah, and even if Jarrett Jackson and Jalen Sami don't turn into all Big Ten type defensive tackles, those are massive bodies that are going to be able to help with the freshness and the speed and the stamina for the main guys, and just their size alone is going to create problems for opposing offensive linemen.
They're going to be firm. They're going to be strong. They're going to be firm. They're going to be mature. And I think that bodes well when you match up later in the year, like against a Minnesota, maybe against an Iowa. I think
Maryland.
Maryland, they'll run around with Tagovailoa and do some funky things. But Minnesota and Iowa specifically, I think Iowa and Minnesota are going to have to
find the power game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to find a different way to beat Michigan State. Last year, Illinois could not find another way to beat Michigan State, and Michigan State was. I mean, they surprised Illinois by moving defensive tackles to defensive end and just kind of, played a shell game with them and surprised them and things like that. But they beat them with a lot of, size and physicality, even with all the injuries. But these four, and then Halliday's added some weight. He's an experienced guy at linebacker. Windman at about 245 is a big inside linebacker. That's a big inside linebacker. And if those two guys...
he's fast.
Yes, he is.
He's fast, too.
And with all those defensive linemen with their size and ability up front, I'm expecting Windman and Halliday to have a clean wash. They're going to have room to roam.
I agree.
And they're going to arrive with some thump. So I think that front six, front seven is good. And I think it should show itself against Central Michigan, who is more of a two tight end type of team. Central Michigan's offensive style is similar to Jay Johnson. They'll go two tight ends and nothing too fancy. They'll run some counters here and there, but they'll try to ball control it and run it. They had Lou Nichols 2 years ago, nation's leading rusher. That's what they want to be. Maybe they'll change everything up. I don't know, but their quarterbacks. It's not like Baylor Zappe's going to come in here and light it up with 52 pass attempts. So Central, for the way they want to play, I think they're going to have trouble getting breathing room against Michigan State up front. I think that's where things should start to go well immediately for Michigan State. If Michigan State's going to be good this year, their defensive front has to be a big part of it. And if they're going to be good, then that defensive front needs to be dominant against a Central Michigan offense that tries to be physical. I'm not sure it's a great Central Michigan offense. There's some MAC teams that have good quarterbacks, but not every MAC team has great quarterbacks. And this particular MAC team, I don't expect to have a good throwing quarterback. I'm still looking into it, so don't hold me to that yet. But this defensive front for Michigan State should be dominant on Friday night. That's what I'm looking for.
Hey, JC, one more thing on Chris Bogle. When you talk about Reynolds giving him a pitch count in camp, coaches like Reynolds, and I have comments on Coach Reynolds in one of my 3 and outs here too. Coaches like him don't put guys that are chumps on pitch counts in camp.
Right.
That's not just, let's give Chris Bogle, some rest before the game. I mean, he sees in Bogle, I think, significant potential, and that contributes. Obviously, he had an injury and everything, but I just think that when you got a guy like Reynolds giving him pitch counts, that's another indication that this guy's good.
Sure. Yeah, Reynolds was really impressed with him, the way he shows leadership skills. And Reynolds went back and watched video. A lot of these assistant coaches that I've met over the years, or head coaches, they don't go back and watch film, which I find peculiar. But Reynolds did. He knows a lot about these guys. And Michigan State's had a high turnover of defensive line coaches and corner coaches over the years.
Yes.
I mean, that needs to solidify and stabilize so they can get some of that D'Antonio continuity going. So, but, Bogle is a guy that was hurt last year. If he hadn't got hurt, he might not be back. Jacoby Windman, with what happened, if that hadn't happened, he might not be back. So those things have resulted in Michigan State being more mature in the defensive front 6 and 7 than maybe they would have been without some of the problems they had last year. And these guys are committed. They think they can be pretty good, and they're motivated, and they're driven. And that Tucker's going to dig his spurs into their sides, and he's going to get these guys going. Because Tucker, say what you want about Tucker, he can motivate. He can get the guys. He can get the guys rolling. So.
Yes, he can. And you mentioned the Illinois game. I think it's worth noting as the season here is about to start, and we look back on last season. After the incident in Ann Arbor, some teams, I think many teams, might have just cratered after that. And that did not happen. That Illinois game, if I'm not mistaken, was the following week.
I was stunned. I didn't think they had a chance to beat Illinois. Not that I thought Illinois was great.
Illinois was a pretty good team. They were a pretty good team. And what the head coach of this program did, and his staff, to get that entire machine in position physically, mentally, emotionally, those are two different things, to be able to win that game. And by the way, let's also not forget that Peyton Thorne threw an interception on State's first possession and Illinois was about to go up 7-0, and State stops them on 4 straight downs inside the 2 or 3 yard line. Like, the recipe for just totally cratering was there, and Mel Tucker kept that from happening.
Amazing.
And in fact,
Illinois
won that game.
Yeah, Illinois was like one of the hotter teams in the Big Ten at that time. Physical. They had beaten Minnesota.
Yeah.
And Michigan State coming out of the tunnel incident at Michigan Stadium tunnel, and all those things, and the players they lost, and the abuse they took all week. Hey, Tucker got them rolling. I was amazed by that. Going to that game, I was telling Conan, and I liked Illinois, and I'm like, I don't see Michigan State. I think they run out of gas. They're flat here, and they controlled that game. They won it by 8, but they did. They really were 2 touchdowns better the whole time. Stop the run, but
yeah, by the way, there was so much talk, and still is, about the decision to throw the ball deep in Illinois territory down at the end. If Peyton Thorne sees the absolutely wide open receiver in the end zone, there was nobody within 15 yards of whoever that was. I think it might have been Barker.
Yes, Barker. Barker was coming open.
If Peyton Thorne sees him and underhands it to Barker in the end zone, everybody's talking instead about what a brilliant call that was to just put the dagger in him, and instead, because Peyton Thorne didn't see him, and that's part of my second down of the train out here. Instead, everybody's losing their mind over bad game management, bad play calling, etc. That play was there. It was wide open.
Mm-hmm. It was a ballsy play for Michigan State because Tucker did not trust the kicker, did not trust the long snapper. So
that's a whole other reason why he made that call. Let's not also forget that for all of the moaning about the play call, State won the game.
Yeah. Yeah. But they have to make sure that they don't have. The schedule's going to be so tough this year, and the winnable games are going to be tight. They've got to in terms of game situational awareness, that stuff needs to be good this year. It needs to be good this year.
Of course. I'm looking at that single play call just in its own vacuum, but I do agree with the general sentiment, which I think is accurate across the fan base, that game management, clock management, play calling, that all does need to, you need to tighten the screws, as you put it, JC. Quality control, tighten the screws, all that has to improve. But I do think that there were certain situations where the critiques maybe weren't warranted to the extent that they came. Particularly, and we haven't even touched on this, one of the things I sort of wanted to say here tonight is exactly a year ago, you couldn't get a Tuck Coming t-shirt because they were out of stock coming off the 11-2 season. 12 games later, there are people screaming and yelling. One thing that I think it really needs to happen is this is our coach. This is our staff. This is our program. And are there things that we can look at that must be improved? Of course. But this is the same guy who found Kenneth Walker, who got Kenneth Walker to come to Michigan State, put Kenneth Walker in position to be the running back, led the team somehow to an 11-2 season, and I just don't think that after the immediate 5-7 following season, that same coach, and for the most part, although I want to address this too, the staff, those guys don't all of a sudden turn into bums. And I think that all showed in that Illinois game last year. Of course, there's the counter argument that the Indiana game was the polar opposite, which is, of course, a very fair counter argument.
And they led that game 24-7 at halftime. And everybody knows how it
Yeah.
got away. But there were some defensive things going on that game in the second half with a quarterback who only attempted 7 passes, yet they rushed for 260. When you got a lead like that, you make that quarterback beat you. And there are some things that kind of just broke through the ice on that one. And you can't have games like that. They were
No, you
they
can't.
were 5-7, and when you have a situation like that, you deserve to be 5-7. Now,
I agree.
This year, if you beat, it's on the table for Michigan State. Yeah, the schedule's tough, but if you beat Indiana this year, you're a 4-8 team. If you beat Indiana and Nebraska, I think you're 5-7. If you beat Indiana, Nebraska, and Maryland, I think you're 6-6. If you beat Indiana, Nebraska, Maryland, and Minnesota, I think you're 7-5. If you beat Indiana, Nebraska, Maryland, Minnesota, and Iowa, you can be 8-4. So winning these winnable games, like Tucker talked about in Indianapolis, that's the difference. I mean, hey, if things go bad, it can end up 5-7 again. But these are going to be tight games, and I think that game in Maryland after the Washington game is going to be that's going to be the swing game. It's going to be an indication of where things are headed. And Maryland expects to be the best they've been in years this year, and they beat Michigan State last year. So we'll see. Sometimes in this conference,
You want my second down?
Sometimes in this conference, it's hard to beat a team 2 straight years because you think you got them covered, and then they come back at you hard. So yeah, let's go. We're going 3 and out. We got 1. Let's go number 2. What do you got for your second 3 and out?
Second down. We wish you nothing but the best, Peyton Thorne.
Yeah.
So Peyton Thorne left for a very simple, basic reason. The head coach wasn't just delivering blabbery coach speak when he said once again that there would be competition for the starting roles at every single position throughout the roster and across the program. Peyton Thorne, God bless him, was sort of like, yeah, okay, coach, that's cool, but you don't really mean that when it comes to me, right? I'm the 2-time starting quarterback. Tucker told him he had to earn a spot again. In some programs out there, 2-year starters kind of have the starting position locked down. But I believe that it was really important for the head coach of this program to demonstrate that nobody is entitled to anything. And coincidentally, Noah Kim, by all accounts, was outplaying Thorne, and the entire team saw it. Everyone should thank Peyton Thorne and honestly, wish him the best. He was a huge part of that 11-2 season. But there is a perspective that the attitude of, well, this is my spot, to say nothing of the fact that he was in the process of being overtaken by the younger, faster, perhaps better guy. That just doesn't jive with what Tucker's trying to do here. And so right out of the gate, I think we're going to see improvement at the quarterback position, whether it's Kim, Hauser, or both of them. Because I believe that there's a significant uptick in athleticism. Peyton Thorne was decent game manager, made some huge plays. When I think back to that Michigan game, the 4th down pass and the Penn State game, the 4th down passes, which were the exact same play, to Jaden Reed down in the corner there, one for the first down down near the goal line, the other for the touchdown to Penn State against Penn State. Those were amazing plays by Peyton Thorne. But I think both Noah Kim and Caden Hauser, these are guys that are going to extend plays to a better extent than Peyton Thorne could. They're going to present a far more meaningful threat for defenses when it comes to the quarterback being able to run the RPO, to run the straight option, to run draws out of the gun, and to let it loose when the pocket collapses and room opens up for a big run. I think, and you sort of alluded to this, although I'm not sure if this is what you were trying to say, but you said you might see improvement at the quarterback position by the end of September. I agree with you. I think Michigan State, over the course of this season and pretty much right away, is going to have an improved situation at quarterback. That's second down there, Comp.
That would be interesting. I think there's going to be a learning curve, even though Noah Kim's been around for a long time and has gotten on the field a little bit. I think Kim is more talented, but Thorne's experience is going to be missed a little bit at the beginning of the year, possibly. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Kim will come out and he'll just be like sharp as a tack from the beginning. And if that happens, and if the run game and the offensive line and tight end blocking and St. Patrons on defense is like just really, tip top from the beginning, and they play real well against Washington, then all of a sudden it's time to reevaluate what the team might be capable of. That would be exciting. I'm not predicting that. I'm not closing the door on that being on that happening. I do think that I respect your opinion that you think Michigan State will be improved at quarterback this year. I need to see it to believe it. At this point, on August 29th, I'm thinking that Michigan State is not quite as good at quarterback for the first 3 games as they were when Thorne was healthy. Now, that being said, like you said, Kim did outplay Thorne, according to my sources, last spring during spring football. And that's a big reason why Thorne left, of course. I'm hearing chemistry is good on the team. I'm hearing chemistry in some ways and leadership was pretty good last year, but not great in some ways. I think there's some players that are going to rally around Noah Kim, and they're excited. I agree, and they're excited about the change. That's all I'm going to say about that. In all due respect to Peyton Thorne, I do agree with what you said.
I was so careful. That's why I was so careful to pay him his respect.
Yes,
because he deserves it.
Yeah.
However, I will echo what you said with respect to chemistry, leadership, and the rallying around both Noah Kim and Caden Hauser. That is an entirely different vibe this year than it was last year.
Mm-hmm. And Thorne a lot of times was at his best on those 3rd and long, 4th and long type situations. Some of the 3rd and long, 4th and long 2-point conversions he threw against Michigan with that big upset.
Yep.
Kenneth Walker was great that day, but Thorne had delivered some amazing plays also. That being said, there were bouts of inconsistency like there are with all quarterbacks. But, I'm not ready to say – it wouldn't surprise me if Kim is better and better right away. But I'm going into the season saying that Thorne was a little bit better here at the outset. But things can change quickly. It's the cyclical nature of college football. Sometimes players get plugged in as new quarterbacks and they hit the ground running and they're outstanding immediately. So let's go 3 and out. What's your third one?
Tight ends will be tight.
Yeah.
I've agreed with you and Paul. This has been something that you guys have talked about a lot. Really from the time Jay Johnson has been running the offense, he's said over and over again that the tight end is the most important position for the offense, and that the tight ends, from your perspective, have not delivered, especially relative to blocking. And we've heard that addressed, alluded to, referenced by players and coaches all throughout the offseason, and particularly over the last month. You guys have been on this for the last few years. Even in the 11-2 season, you were not happy with the tight end play. I think because of all of the focus on this, and because of all of the talk about the tight end just not coming through when it comes to blocking, the guys that are there, I think we're hearing that they've been working their asses off on demonstrating that they are focused on blocking. I think Malik Carr is about to blossom. I really do. I know he's a powder keg, and I know that there's the chance that he can be phenomenal 1 minute and then perhaps make a mistake the next. I think that he's maturing. I think that he realizes what opportunity he has in front of him, and I think he's being coached up. I think Evan Morris and Michael Masunas are 2 rock star blockers in the making. I think both of those guys are workhorses. And you're looking at Malik Carr as a guy who can stretch defenses and be a threat as a receiver, but also become a true blocker. And those other guys, They're like no-namers who love being no-namers and are going to just lock down on improving the blocking. The focus has been there. There's been tons of talk about it, and I think it's going to happen. And it's a big reason why I think that the rushing attack will be in the top 5 in the Big Ten.
And it can't be in top 5 in the Big Ten without tight end blocking, without improved tight end blocking. I've mentioned this in the past that a lot of times last year when I'd look at Michigan State run game and a play that would go negatively, and I'd look back and all the offensive linemen were pretty solid. You look at the tight end and he was missing a block. They've impressed upon Malik Carr the importance that he is as a blocker, not only for the team but to himself and his pro aspirations. If you want to play in the NFL, you better learn to block. This is a former wide receiver that was not thrilled about moving to tight end initially. Purdue wanted to move him to tight end, and he left. Came to Michigan State. They said the same thing, and he was like, well, that's what I have to do to get paid. And that's what he told me one day where I was at Michigan State's football camp. And he said, well, that's the ticket to the league. That's what I got to do. And that's kind of the way he's naturally built to be a tight end. Now, being able to deliver the grunt work as a blocker, we could all sit here and say, man, just block. It shouldn't be that hard. Well, it is hard. And the good ones make it look easy, but it's not easy. Yeah. And when you have a good one that blocks well at tight end, that's an asset. And Michigan State's not had that in recent years. But he's got good hands and good ability to threaten the seam deep and make plays after the catch. If he can also add the block component to it, it can really make this offense sing. So Evan Morris, the walk-on from Ovid Elsie, been hearing that he likes to stick his nose in it. And I've not seen it, but he was getting more playing time last year on special teams and so forth. If he can be a good, solid blocker, and Carr can do it as well, then those are big X factors for the season. And this is your 3 and out. That's your third point, and you're predicting that tight end blocking is going to be tight and sharp and good. And if it is, and if, like you said, the quarterbacks are good, which is another big X factor, then this team can go 7-5 or better. And people might say 7-5, that's no big great thing. But like I said a couple weeks ago, and like I've said in other radio shows, 7-5. If it's a good, sharp, solid, fundamentally sound 7-5 with consistent defense, blocking and tackling, and let's say Iowa's good, you go out there and play well and lose, you end up 7-5, it's something to build on if it's the right flavor of 7-5. If they play the right flavor of 75, that means that they're going to be within an eyelash of being 8-4 or better, And like I said, and I've mentioned this before, people might get sick of it, but when I throw out a name of a program, and I'm wondering what the listeners, what comes to mind when I say a program like Ole Miss. When you think Ole Miss right now, what do you think? You think pretty good team, I would imagine, right? Like an explosive team that's knocking on the door to top 15 last year, right? Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin. I think not a team that I root for, but a pretty good football team, right? Well, they lost 5 games last year. You can be a good team in the SEC West and come out of it with 5 losses. You can be a good team in the Big Ten East this year and show progress and upgrade your physicality toward the future and be 7-5. I know Michigan State fans are hoping for something better than that. And this is college football, and there are always surprises in college football. At this time last year, everybody had Wisconsin in the top 15. Everybody had Michigan State in the top 20. Nobody had TCU in the top 25. So there's going to be surprises. Everybody had A&M like number 7 in the country, and they go 5-7. So there's going to be surprises. Everything that we're seeing preseason, people talking about over and unders for wins, we can think what's going to happen when Michigan State plays Minnesota in a month and a half. But we've not seen any of these teams play. We've not seen any of them play. But it's the nature of college football to talk about it all summer, and there's only 12 games a year. So you spend 358 days or whatever the rest of the year talking about those games and trying to figure out what's going to happen. Michigan State's got some explosiveness. They got some size. They got some depth. They got a lot of question marks. But if they get it all, and if they stay healthy and they have communication on defense and get things stapled together, they're going to be a team that's difficult to beat every single Saturday. That's what I think.
Hey, JC.
Yeah.
JC,
yes.
Can I go for it on 4th and short?
You got another one? Difficult to beat against most opponents. Now, they've not matched up well with Ohio State for several years, but difficult to beat maybe the other 11 weeks. Yes, 4th and short. You're in 4-down territory. I'll give you one more on a 4 and out.
It's 4th and short, and it's about chemistry. And there's been so much talk about the improved chemistry, and there's a reason for that, and that is there's improved chemistry.
Okay.
And the reasons for the improvement sometimes in a program aren't easily visible or notable for those of us who are on the outside and we don't have our fingers necessarily in the real pulse of what's going on inside those doors. Sometimes the chemistry is disrupted by one or two people in the program who never even put on the uniform. And we've all been in work environments where like a quote unquote senior executive or a member of the company who has a lot of influence that a lot of people scratch their heads over as to why they have that influence is a total disruption of the overall vibe of the workplace, and it screws up the chemistry, creates divisions across departments, cliques, all that kind of stuff. Saeed Khalif was a worthwhile experiment. He was. The point of him coming in from Tucker's perspective was, you know what, I need to have someone to keep kind of the day-to-day minutia out of my hair. Now, that's probably a gross oversimplification of it, but that was part of it. But the fact that Saeed is no longer in that position means everyone in the program can go to work every day, not having to moan to themselves about needing to hang around with that guy for 15 hours every single day. That alone has been a massive improvement across almost every aspect of the program. Now, there's another situation, and that is BT Jordan. Another worthwhile experiment. BT Jordan is a very different situation because everyone across the program really likes him. Likable guy. However, chemistry across a program gets upset when one of your coaches sometimes forgets to set his alarm in the morning and doesn't show up to practice. And God bless BT, but he just wasn't built to be a big-time assistant coach for a big-time college football program. And that improvement of just the removal of him, but then on top of it, Deron Reynolds, he is the real deal. He has immediately improved the entire way in which the defensive line is coached every day. He's immediately improved the chemistry and overall vibe of professionalism and togetherness across the entire staff. And so my 4th and short is that the improved chemistry isn't just a bunch of mumbo-jumbo, blabbery coach speak. It's real. Everyone in the program loves it and is feeling it, and it's going to show up on the field.
Mel Tucker said that they have upgraded the coaching staff, and I think you hit on a lot of those points right there. And there were some experiments. Some of the things were, they thought Mel Tucker was going outside the box on some things. Some of it didn't work, but you learn as you go. And now they and you know what? When you've got the big contract and you just went 11-2, you can go deep on some things here and there. You can go long on some experiments. The risk reward's in your favor a little bit. Some of it didn't work, but like I've said earlier in the podcast, I think Michigan State's reverting back in some ways to what Michigan State has needed to be in the past. Some of those tent poles, the 3-star evaluation, but Michigan State has more capacity to go out and get a few more of those 4 stars. Maybe not as many as Tucker might have envisioned when he first took over. But landscape's changed in a lot of ways. But getting back to blocking and tackling, 3-star evaluation with a few 4 stars sewn in, and then whatever you get out of the portal, you get out of the portal. But get them coached up on the same page with physicality and size, and you can be a tough customer. And I think that's kind of where they're headed right now. They need to, harness in that consistency. And we don't know what's going on with wide receivers in terms of playmaking ability out there. Montori Foster, he might just be a guy. I'm not saying he's going to be Keyshawn Martin, but they kind of need that Keyshawn Martin type of surprise from somebody. Alante Brown. Devin Thomas, the first year that John L. Smith was here, kind of came out of nowhere. Muhsin Muhammad hadn't shown anything until 1995, Nick Saban's first year. I mean, sometimes these things happen. Michigan State needs some of that type of magic if they want to flirt with an 8-4 type of season. Yes.
JC.
Yes.
Plaxico Burress dropped a lot of passes his first year in the program.
1998, he did. He had trouble. He had trouble with press coverage at Oregon, his second or third game of the season, and he knew right away he had a lot more to learn than he thought. Yeah, he dropped passes, and he was big against 98 in that upset of Ohio State, but he was inconsistent. Came back in 99, a different type of player. Now he was a big time top 100 talent coming in. Sat out a year, Prop 48, but. Montori Foster, different because he hadn't played much football. We'll see what he becomes. Antonio Gates Jr. has a lot of ability. Courtney Hawkins today said it's the deepest room that they've had since he's been here. I think Antonio Gates was a 4-star talent, but he might be third string. But he was the best receiver that particular day in the scrimmage in April, the spring scrimmage. And coaches have mentioned him all throughout August, making a play here, making a play there, showing up on some of the video releases that we see that the university sends out. So I think that he has vast potential. He spent 12 months in the program now, weight training and all those things. With all of his with all of his pedigree and DNA, it's starting to match up with him. To what point, I'm not sure. I think he still might be third string for now. Maybe not. But his future looks good. Maybe he is second string. Maybe he gets on the field. Maybe he's the guy that I'm talking about that could just kind of rise up and be a difference maker at wide receiver. Those are the little things that put you over the top. These other things make you good every week. But if they start getting magic from Noah Kim and Antonio Gates and Alante Brown and Montori Foster and Nathan Carter, the new running back out of UConn, who I kind of get an idea might be starting on Saturday.
I'm going to be surprised if Carter is not starting. I just get the vibe like he's a guy who's been put on a pitch count. That's another example of a guy. I don't think you're putting a guy like that on a pitch count unless you really think that he's ready to go.
He's like 190 plus. Athletic, weight room freak. They love him in the weight room. Runs hard. I keep hearing that he runs hard for the extra yards. So you got to do that and don't break yourself, of course. I've been hearing a little bit that Carter and Mangum were kind of outshining Berger a little bit. So we'll see how that all shakes down.
That doesn't surprise me. One thing about Berger, first of all, I thought that he really improved as the season went on.
Yeah.
But here's something that we know he really can do, and that's catch out of the backfield.
Yeah.
He is very capable on third and medium. When you need another option out in the flat, he can be dangerous, and he did that a ton of times last season.
I agree. All right, there's reason to watch this team. There's reason for, I don't want to say cautious optimism. There's just reason to watch. There's reason to watch. There's possibility that a lot of things could click and hit for this team, and we'll see what happens if it does. It needs to start out for Michigan State with a victory on Friday against what I expect to be a very game Central Michigan Chippewa team that's a proud football program at their level. McElwain's a good coach, had a very good team 2 years ago, so they're going to be a tough sparring partner. They're going to come out. They're going to come out swinging. Michigan State's got to have the crowd together, get the ground game going, get some play action going, have Montori Foster's deep threat, stack up that quarterback run on defense, and just get to work and get to 1-0 heading into week number 2 against Richmond, get to 2-0, and then see what they can do against Washington. And from there, then Maryland is the swing game. That's what I think. We're going to learn a lot in the month of September. It's going to be a lot of fun. Crowley Sullivan, we really appreciate you coming in and sharing your wisdom and your enthusiasm. I'm sure Michigan State fans found it interesting and also somewhat entertaining. So thanks a lot, Crowley. Appreciate it.
I hope so. Thank you, JC. Thank you so much. It's a blast, and go green.
There he goes, Crowley Sullivan. Really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon, Crowley. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
There he goes. All right, so let's get back here to the comments real quick, and then we'll go back to the mailbag, and then we'll call it a night. We might have some questions left over. Maybe we'll do one tomorrow afternoon. We'll have to wait and see. What do we have? I got to go back and find out where we left off last time. I don't want to go through all of them. All right. Mark Webster, excited for tailgating. All right, LFG says, bummed for Michigan State fans that athletic linebacker Snow isn't full go yet, praying for his full recovery. Yeah, that's going to take some time, and it's going to be, I'm going to go back to the practice video here a little bit. It's going to be, the odds are against him a little bit, but great kid, and he really was shaping up to have a great future there as an athletic linebacker. We'll see. That's a guy I'm going to be looking for during I've watched him in practice a little bit. I've not seen him try to go full go. I'm not sure what that looks like. I'll watch pregame Friday, try to get a better idea of where he stands on those things. High Pers is not complimentary of Mel Tucker. That's fine. Sea-Dog said Coach D understood the code to recruiting at Michigan State. Hottie Sob says bring back D'Antonio, get rid of Tucker. JJ McKay, 6-man-1, says Coach D wouldn't have survived and thrived in these times. I might respectfully disagree with that. Maybe the current age version of D'Antonio might not have survived and thrived, but give me D'Antonio, at 55 years old in this landscape. He would not have loved it, but I think he would have figured it out. He might have even, zigged against the zag. Everybody's going NIL, transfer portal. You have to do some NIL, but he might have gone more 3-star evaluation, player development, like Wake Forest is doing. LFG says Oklahoma pays big bags. OU media for months anticipated they had maybe a silent inside track for Stone. Yeah, definitely. And at SpartanMag.com, we've been saying that for several months also, that Stone was not happening for Michigan State. LFG says, really hoping Hauser plays his way into being quarterback one by the end of the season. You're free to have that opinion. I'm just be curious why you're really rooting for him over Kim. I'm just curious because I think a lot of people are that way. My theory is people are excited about Hauser in part because the unknown is undefeated. And the unknown quarterback, the backup quarterback, is always the most popular guy in town, especially if the team is losing a little bit. So I'm not surprised there's a lot of people that'll think that way. Mark Webster says, Coach D is loving life, golfing, enjoying retirement. I don't think D'Antonio did a lot of golfing previously. I've seen him around a little bit, but I'm glad to hear that if that's true. LFG says, love what Jim just pointed out. I saw early in 22 that Tuck had added players to MSU roster from outside the Midwest. Elevated hashtag. Mark Webster says the MLive article showing where former Michigan State players went out of the portal was very telling. Lots of MAC players and G5 teams. Michigan State has much better depth and talent now. To an extent, yeah, I think Michigan State's talent level had gone down a little bit, but I don't think that's the entire litmus test on the level of the program. Yes, Michigan State players went to the portal, and they ended up like Chase Klein at Eastern Michigan and so forth. Jess Lord Boateng goes to Akron. Luke Fulton, he's one that went to Kentucky, didn't pan out there, though. But if the portal had existed in 2011, the portal exists. Makaja Reynolds goes to the portal. You think he's going Power 5? No, he's going MAC or less. Tyler Hoover, he goes. You think he's going Power 5? He was a big-time recruit, but hadn't done much. He might have gone MAC. Okay? Benny Fowler, if he enters the portal in 2011, no one knew who he was. He'd probably end up in the MAC. Follow what I'm saying here? If Connor Cook had entered the portal in 2011, he's going to the MAC. If Tony Lippett had entered the portal as a sophomore, he's going to the MAC. A lot of these guys are NFL players. If Jeremy Langford had entered the portal in 2011 and left Michigan State, he would have gone to the MAC. All right? So Davion Williams enters the portal, and he goes to Memphis. Who's the other guy? Barnett. Julian Barnett, was that his name? These are four-star guys. They go to the portal. They don't go over. They hadn't really gotten started at Michigan State, and they didn't do much where they went. But if they had stayed at Michigan State, Chase Klein, Julian Barnett, Davion Williams, you can't tell me that D'Antoni and his staff would not have been able to turn those guys into players. And that's not a criticism of the current coaches. What I'm saying is what you said about the MLive article. All due respect to MLive, they do great work. But if you look at the players and conclude that there was no talent based on the fact that when the players left, they didn't end up at great programs, that's foolhardy. Because like I just established to you, although it's not factual because it didn't happen. But what happened if those players I mentioned had gone into the portal in 2010, 2011, 2012, they would have been just like those players. And it wouldn't have meant jack crap because they were still good players, but that's where they would have went at that point in their career. So I appreciate your post, but for people to cite that as proof, I think, in my opinion, is foolhardy. All right, what do we have here? But thanks for the post. Hadi Saab says Michigan State's going 3-9 this year. Hadi Saab seems a little salty, but he says bring back D'Antonio. D'Antonio's done. Everybody knows that. He did a great job. It's not worth talking about. What do we have here? Malcolm Jones Sr. says hello. I think I'm seeing you later this week. We're talking about that. We got some plans. Spartan MD says, evening, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Now I'm going to wrap that up. Let's go back over here to the mailbag. Tim D says, Boblo makes Michigan great. What are you talking about? Talking about Boblo Island? And which Boblo Island? Talking about the one in the Detroit area or the one up by Sheboygan and Mackinac Island? They're both called Boblo Island. They're both spelled Bois Blanc, the French, which means, does that mean White Island? Yes. But Bois Blanc, Boblo became Boblo. Kind of French slang. Both called Boblo. I don't know which one you're talking about, but I don't disagree. Other things make the state of Michigan great, but Boblo, okay, whatever. All right, so let's go back here to the mailbag. You don't mind me getting a little testy a little bit on some of those things, do you? A little animation, getting ready for the season. You guys don't mind that, do you? If so, give us a like. If not, give us one of these. Rather one of these because it helps, but do what you need to do. Question number 8, Ranger 410 from Royal Oak says, do you know of any changes to my projected depth chart on offense? You posted the offensive depth chart over 2 weeks ago, so wondering if you've heard anything more on that, especially the wide receivers. Wide receivers, they're moving them in, moving them out. I think it's going to be, no, I've not heard anything new. Gates is a guy that I put like third string, but maybe he's knocking on a door for second string. Jerron Glover is a guy whose film in high school I didn't love, but he was on the field earlier for a game or two last year, whereas Gates was not. They still like Glover, but it would not surprise me if Gates has surpassed Glover. They still like Glover, but that's competitive there. Wide receivers are deep. They're competing. Offensive line, I'm not expecting any changes there. I think it's all pretty straightforward. If Samac is back and ready to go, I've not really heard if he is or not. They might. They're trying to win this game. They don't want to mess around with it. If Samac's ready to go, he's going to play. And if he comes out, who are the other centers? Vandermark can do it a little bit. Fincher can do it a little bit. Duplain did it more than anyone else in the August. So, all right. But in terms of offense, I think number 1 and 2 tight ends are still, it's Malik Carr and Evan Morris. Evan Morris is my projection there. I've not been told that. That's just kind of what I'm gathering. Running backs have been competing all along. And I think we had Nathan Carter 1 and Berger 1A. I think it's going to be Nathan Carter 1 and Berger 2, and Mangum is short yardage guy that if if Mangum is hot, he could become number 2. So, but to answer your question, no, I'm not anticipating many changes there on offense from what we had. I'm kind of thinking it's going to be Noah Kim, and and that there's some. I've gotten some smoke signals on that a little bit, but in the offensive depth chart projection that we wrote at SpartanMag.com a couple weeks ago, we had that thing at 50-50. So they've named a quarterback. We just don't know who it is. It's not leaked out, but I kind of think it's going to be Kim, but I don't know. It could be wrong. Question number 9 from Matt in Grand Rapids. He says, depth has been talked about a lot this preseason by the coaches. Where are you looking on Friday night to see if there actually is more depth on the football team? All right, good question. Where am I looking for depth? I'm looking at safety. For instance, if Dylan Tatum did not win the starting corner job, which is possible, does he move back to safety? If he's back at safety and Armarion Smith, the transfer from Cincinnati, if he's healthy, if you have Tatum and Smith as backup safeties, that depth is better than I expected, because I've been saying that safety depth there is a big concern. But if you have those two guys back there, I'd feel better about that. But I think Tatum might be the corner, but he might not. You got Caleb Coley there. You've got Marquis Lowry. Don't count him out. Chuck Brantley. And I hear Chance Rucker's playing really well. True freshman. So does that give Michigan State the luxury of moving? But if Tatum's one of your best 11, you want him on the field. I don't know. That's going to be interesting. And that could change as the season goes along. Other places of depth. Defensive end. We talked about this earlier with Crowley Sullivan. Who are the backup defensive ends? Is Zion Young starting? Is Chris Bogle starting? If so, does that mean Tumisi Adeleye at 6'4", 280 is a backup defensive end? If he's a backup defensive end and he shows signs of being what people think he could be and what he was rated to be as a high schooler, if he can pack all that in and only play 30 snaps as a backup, that's a position of strength. I thought he looked pretty good in the spring scrimmage. Talking to Adeleye, he's not a guy that's full of himself. He wants to prove that he's as good as the accolades have indicated. But all athletes question things a little bit. I mean, the fact is he's only played 2 football games, I think, since 2018. So there's going to be a learning curve with him. If he doesn't start 30 snaps a game, comes along slowly, but if that guy is good and he's a backup defensive end, that's nice. If Brandon Wright plays like he did against Wisconsin last year as a 5th-year senior with some sporadic pass rush to him, if that's a backup guy, that's nice. Avery Dunn, if that's a backup and he builds on what he did last year, that's nice. That's the type of defensive front that a good team has. So when you're talking about depth, that's what I'm looking for. Jalen Sami, I'm thinking he's going to be second string. I think Barrow starts and Harmon starts. I think Maverick Hansen is a good, solid, venerable, veteran second stringer who has started in the past. Sami started for a couple years out at Colorado. If he's a second stringer as big as he is, at 25 snaps a game, that is good depth. That's what I'm anticipating. We'll have to wait and see. Linebacker, Halliday and Jacoby Windman are going to be good. Who's the first linebacker off the bench? Brule, he can play either one of those slots, mainly Will and slot linebacker. But Jordan Hall, does he back up Windman? 5 snaps a game? 10 snaps a game? Not sure. True freshman. If Michigan State's fortunate enough to be in a blowout situation, we might see more of Jordan Hall, and that'll be entertaining. I think he's a good one. He's got leadership ability. Question 10. We've got 2 questions left. There were other questions that were posted. Maybe I'll get to those tomorrow. Keep your YouTube on. Brian in Flushing, Michigan says, who do you think gets the first crack at the kicking and punting duties? He says these are super important battles for the ability to control the battle of field position and all the important swing games, against Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Maryland. He says, I'm interested in your opinion. Place kicker, Jonathan Kim. I'm thinking it's got to be him. He's got all the leg talent coming in from North Carolina. He's going to be very good with kickoffs, a lot of touchbacks. He's got a big leg. Can they make field goals? That's going to, like you said, that's going to be a big factor in these swing games. I don't know. He only attempted 1 PAT at North Carolina. His personal kicking coach, Dan Orner, who played a year or 2 at Michigan State back in the Saban years, he loves the guy. Now, he's a client, so he's going to be in favor of him, right? But he thinks the guy's ready to be a good plus kicker at the Big Ten level. I don't know. But it's going to be Jonathan Kim. He competed with Stephen Rusnak, the guy from Clarkson, who's had some opportunities the last couple of years and has not looked great, but they like to have him in the program because they might need him. And he's played a little bit. He's gotten better, but I'm expecting Jonathan Kim. At the punter position, they brought in Michael O'Shaughnessy from Ohio State, but Ryan Eckley looked good in the spring scrimmage. Redshirt freshman from Lithia, Florida. O'Shaughnessy is a 5th or 6th year senior, so you got a young guy and an older guy. They're going to battle. It's a situation where if Eckley doesn't win the job, I don't think he's a guy that like automatically enters the portal because there's so many years between these guys. O'Shaughnessy is going to be one and done. So I think that's been a competition all August, and I don't have I'm kind of guessing that O'Shaughnessy is going to win it, but that's not based on anything. Eckley had good numbers in high school, so did O'Shaughnessy, but Eckley was pretty good in the spring, but I'm not really sure. I'm guessing O'Shaughnessy, the transfer from Ohio State. I wouldn't be shocked if they each get opportunities on Friday. Question 11, last question of the day. PSP from Washington. He says, if you could choose one win this year outside of the Michigan game that would be most impactful, which one would you choose for the Spartans? Not necessarily from a national perspective, but to show you the program is on the right track. Good question. I got to go with the Washington game. Washington's coming in top 10. Washington looked great, scoring 45 points against everybody last year. Looked great on offense against Michigan State last year. Michigan State's pass defense is going to be young. Washington's got all kinds of talent at quarterback and wide receiver. Gained some pre-snap advantages with some of those motions. And Michigan State looked a little out of sorts on some of those things. They're very good with their scheming on offense there. So, Michigan State could play really well there, and it's just going to be hard to keep Washington from scoring 40 points. If Michigan State somehow wins that game, it'd be a huge surprise. I'm not going to say shock, but it'd be a big national surprise for Michigan State to beat a top 10 team. And if Michigan State beats Washington and they're 3-0, that would be one of the national talking points on Monday morning when it's time for all the national pundits to talk about college football and what happened that weekend. That one would be the one, obviously. But the Maryland game, I'm guessing Michigan State's going to play really well against Washington, lose by about 10, and the next week against Maryland, that'll be the swing game that decides that is the big indication on where the season is headed. But if they play well enough against Washington to be within that thing 10 points or so, that could be a clue that they're going to answer the bell and be strong all season, and it would probably manifest itself the very next week. All right, that's it. Referee's going to stop the proceedings. It's over. That's it for Spartan Mag Live for today. It's opening week. There's a slight chance we might do something, come back maybe even tomorrow and do something. The game's on Friday. It's coming quick. But we appreciate everybody checking us out here on a Tuesday night in East Lansing, Michigan. Thanks for all the questions over at the SpartanMag.com. Underground Bunker. Become a Magger. Become a subscriber. We need you over there. Give us a like. Subscribe to this channel in the meantime. Thanks for the comments over in the comment section. Sorry I didn't get a chance to look at them all or read them all, but we appreciate your comments and contributions over there. So go over to SpartanMag.com. We'll see you in the Underground Bunker for the rest of the week. We got more pregame coverage coming up, headed toward Friday, and as always, the recruiting coverage. But thanks a lot. Check us out at SpartanMag.com. We'll see you over there. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you next time. SpartanMag.com.